Chapter 601, 2000 Miles Drunks. In front of this person, Gufei had never once shown her face. Conversely, she wanted to react when she saw him move to tear off the cloth covering her face, but she was simply not as dexterous as the man. While she did manage to avoid that initial grab, she nevertheless lost that cloth of hers in the process, so she had no choice but to pout, looking as if she were at his disposal. "You're quite the bold one, aren't you? You even dare to masquerade as me like this." Gufei decisively tossed that cloth she was covering her face with to the ground. Ziziotion's figure, looks, voice, personality, and job class were all totally different from his, yet she still had the guts to cosplay as him. Truly, this woman was bold beyond belief. "That's nothing. Nobody knows how you look like, anyway. In fact, most people probably have no idea if 1000 Miles Drunk's a male or female," Zizioshin said. Just as she finished her words, he heard the players below the rocky outcrop discussing. "Whoa, turns out 1000 Miles Drunk is a babe. Mother of God, that's huge news. Who the heck is that guy? How did he get up there? What is he trying to do?" Gufei was about to faint. After being mistakenly attributed to a demonic existence that would hardly blink an eye when killing, people even believed that he was actually a she. With his resentment intermingling with his open distaste, the look he threw at Zizioshin smoldered with rage. Grabbing a hold of her collar, he thundered, "How much gold have you managed to cheat off these players?" "You can't say that I've cheated them this time. I've gotten a good grasp of your fighting style, enough that I am able to teach them," Zizioshin claimed. "Is that so?" Gufei gave a mirthless laugh, letting her go as he stood to one side. "I'd like to see this." With that said, his right hand delved inside his dimensional pocket to retrieve his moonlit knife walls. Gufei had already decided to seize the guilty and to slay her where she stood if she dared to make something up. Zizioshin beamed cheekily. Moving past Gufei to the head of the makeshift platform, she stood at the very front. At the moment, the players below were busy discussing about the newcomer, the actual 1000 Miles Drunk. "That guy's so arrogant. Yeah, he's simply being too bold to dare grab 1000 Miles Drunk by the collar. 1000 Miles Drunk doesn't seem to have too large a reaction, either. Looks like their relationship isn't that simple." "This is big news. Huge news." Gufei's expression was turning uglier by the second. Zizioshin finally made it to the forefront of the outcrop and gleefully requested, "If someone can throw a monster over, we are about to begin the lesson." "Oh." Someone suddenly slapped his thigh in realization. "I know. That guy must be Eternal Dominion." "Eternal Dominion?" "That's right. Haven't you heard? This instructional lesson was developed by 1000 Miles Drunk and Eternal Dominion." "I heard that it was Eternal Dominion himself who was tossing the monsters up the outcrop yesterday." "Yeah, I did indeed hear about this." Thus, the whole lot of players looked at Gufei and nodded. "So he's Eternal Dominion. That makes sense." Following this discussion, they stared at Gufei expectantly. "What is he standing up there for? Why isn't he throwing the monsters up to 1000 Miles Drunk?" What the man said was far too hurtful, as throwing a monster up was something Gufei was more than willing to do, yet incapable of achieving. Furthermore, his lack of strength was something he took to heart quite seriously. No longer able to stand this, he leapt to the front as well and bellowed, "Who says I'm Eternal Dominion? Did none of you use your appraisal skill? Can't you guys even tell through the skill that I'm not a fighter?" The crowd of players was quiet after hearing Gufei's complaint before finally answering, "You're both so high level, how can we even appraise and find out anything from you?" Gufei was stunned, casually using his appraisal on the players to have a look. Even though his proficiency in the skill was nothing exceptional, he was still able to get a read of their levels, which was how he discovered that the majority of them was at level 40 and under. That was when Gufei realized how important this particular point was for Zizioshin to succeed in passing herself off as 1000 Miles Drunk. While she could dress just like him, there was simply no way she could falsify her job class, which meant that she had to make sure to pick players with lower level than herself, or else she would instantly be exposed with one appraisal. Helpless, Gufei sighed. "I'm not Eternal Dominion. I'm actually the real 1000 Miles Drunk." The crowd immediately broke into a waddle of noise, not subsiding for the longest time. The lot of players gazed at the two similarly dressed people atop the outcrop, never expecting to witness a scene akin to when Sun Wukong met the imposter Monkey King. Are there any fighters down there? Could someone please execute a seismic toss and throw a campfire patroller up here? Gu Fei yelled. The players all exchanged glances for a while before a fighter finally stepped forward and went off to pull a monster over. Bringing it over to the rocky outcrop with a heave of his upper body, the monster ended up crashing right onto its hard surface. Gu Fei facepalmed. Yesterday's experience was being repeated once more before his eyes, and this student was most likely someone whom Ziziotion had lured over from the other grinding maps. So his standard was below those who had been solo grinding in the wilderness camp before. Several more fighters came out to give it a try, but all of them similarly mucked it up with all the monsters they pulled. Stop! This was when a crisp shout sounded from within this crowd, and this speaker was regarding this display with disdain. Everyone followed the voice and saw a priest emerge from the crowd. The staff in his hand was being held like a teacher's pointer as he pointed it right at one of the fighters. Maintain that posture. That fighter, who was hugging a monster, was about to fling it. He was unable to keep that posture for long as the monster was putting up quite the resistance. He was about to ridicule the man for his unrealistic request when white light was bestowed on him. This heal from the priest let him recover the HP he had lost from the damage the monster dealt while it struggled. It took a moment before this person realized that he was not about to die so easily. Thus he obediently listened to the priest's order and stopped moving. A little more to your right. Yup. Right there. At this angle. Can you see it clearly? Where my staff is pointed at. Look here. I'm telling you to look at my staff. Where are you even looking? This priest waved his magic staff right at the fighter, helping him adjust his direction even as he supplied him with heals from time to time. Even while helping the man survive the struggling monster, the priest still managed to take a swig or two from the liquor bottle in his other hand. That's it. That's the direction and angle. Now, use all your strength and toss it. Don't deviate. Young Master Han was finally done adjusting. The fighter was a little skeptical, feeling that the angle and direction young Master Han had adjusted him to was a little ridiculous, but given all the effort they had put into it, he figured that he might as well give it a shot. With a powerful heave from both his arms, that monster followed the trajectory young Master Han had chosen and sailed outward, forming an accurate parabolic arc before landing firmly atop outcrop. Wow! The crowd exclaimed. Everyone was thinking that the priest was truly a skilled individual. Upon scrutiny of his looks, though, everybody felt forlorn once more. Just what was the occasion today? They were all unclear whether Thousand Miles Drunk was a male or female, and now this priest standing before them was yet another androgynous existence that left them scratching their heads. Just what day was today? This was when Ziziotion, standing atop the rocky outcrop, cleared her throat. Everyone, please pay close attention. The crowd quickly perked up, for this was something they had all paid for. No one would be foolish enough not to pay attention. They watched as Ziziotion stepped forward and gave the monster sprawled on the ground 2 swipes with her sword, but that monster got up without sparing a glance at Ziziotion. Leaping right off the outcrop, it dove straight for young Master Han. Everybody was dumbfounded, wondering to themselves if this was all part of the efficient monster grinding method. As such, all their eyes were on young Master Han, and not one of them bothered to lend a hand to the priest. They watched what was happening raptly, intending to commit everything to memory. Gu Fei was almost out of breath as he laughed uproariously. The reason was very simple. The fighter had held onto the monster this whole time and never attacked it, while young Master Han had cast his heal all throughout, accumulating plenty of threat as a result. Simply put, the monster had long since outrun. When young Master Han was done instructing the fighter, and the monster was successfully tossed right up, it became apparent that Ziziotion had quite a bit of issue with her aggro control, which was a rather technical skill by all accounts. As a result, before she could apply the required threat to grab hold of the monster's aggro, it already got up and targeted the player at the top of its charts, young Master Han. Crap! Ziziotion only realized what went wrong after the monster had leapt right off the rocky outcrop, but it was unfortunately too late. Below, young Master Han was currently running all over the place as the monster gave chase, while all the other players were conscientiously watching the whole ordeal. Ha 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 ha! You're doing pretty well. It was not often anyone could see young Master Han in such a flustered state, and Goofy was feeling an immense pleasure from this spectacle. "Stop laughing and come help me!" Young Master Han bellowed angrily. A mere level 45 monster would not force him to the brink of death, but no matter how much he ran and dodged, he would still have to depend on the pathetic damage a priest could deal to slowly chip away the monster till it died, and that was a truly ugly fighting style at the moment. All young Master Han could do right now was awkwardly evade its attacks. Coming, Goofy somersaulted down the rocky outcrop. With his sword in hand, his wrist twirled 2 full circles mid-air, and the flaming glow wreathing his blade circled around the campfire patroller's body sequentially, abruptly insta-killing it. Goofy was the only one in Parallel World that could deal damage twice with a single spell casting, but the problem was that most players were unable to catch this underlying execution, so all they saw was him using one twin incineration to insta-kill a level 45 monster and immediately cheered to express their exuberance. This was the best proof as to which of the two was the real 1,000 miles drunk. After adding everything they had learned thus far, the people finally understood what exactly was going on. Zizioshin, who was still atop the outcrop, was instantly the subject of the crowd's ire. "Swindler!" In all the angry voices that sounded, someone picked up a piece of rock from the ground and tossed it over. These were the melee job classes. The ranged job classes, for their part, all sent their spells or arrows flying to Zizioshin, immediately changing the very look of that 9527 outcrop. Before Goofy could even say a word, Zizioshin disappeared from that rocky outcrop. The players were still dissatisfied, jeering and cursing loudly on their accord. However, these people all soon came to their senses. They, who had all paid that fake 1,000 miles drunk, actually killed her while not knowing where she went. It was impossible for them to chase that debt any longer. Almost instantly, the crowd began criticizing each other, lambasting the others for being too quick with their attack. Many said that they should have waited till that last cough up the money they had paid before doing anything else. After arguing to no end for quite some time, that bunch of players finally shifted their eyes pitifully on to Goofy. They looked as if they were thinking of appealing to his compassion, all in hopes of getting him to honor the transaction they had with the swindler. Before Goofy could say a word in edgeways, young Master Han yelled, "What's this? Wanna learn, huh? Speak up if you're interested in learning the routine." "How are we supposed to know if you're not saying a word?" "Even though you're all earnestly looking at us, you guys must still tell us whether you intend to learn this or not." "Yes, we do." Everyone nodded vigorously, no one caring to nitpick with the benevolent young Master Han. 99 gold coins each. It was apparent that young Master Han actually had no room for kindness and compassion when showing benevolence. The crowd sighed. Nonetheless, everybody knew that it was far too bold and unrealistic to get 1,000 miles drunk to bear the cross for that swindler. None of them dared to say anything more as quite a good number of these players began reaching for their money pouches. Goofy glared viciously at young Master Han. He was just about to say something, when young Master Han interjected once more. "However, seeing just how unlucky everyone has been today, as well as how tiring this day was, we'll just teach you all this one time for free." Everyone was obviously elated when they heard this, as each one of them nodded fervently and expressed their gratitude. "Just this once. We'll be charging as per usual the next time," young Master Han said. "Next time?" The people were rather confused. They had not even finished their lesson here. What did he mean by next time? Young Master Han gave a secretive chuckle. "You guys could not possibly think that our efficient monster grinding routine is only limited to the campfire patroller, right? In truth, we'll be targeting various monsters and developing different efficient monster grinding fighting routines. We'll be meeting with everybody over the next few days, so everyone should pay close attention to the forums or news via other means in-game." "Will there be all kinds of monsters?" The eyes of these players were all wide like saucers. "But of course," answered young Master Han. "What about that monster?" A player mentioned the name of a monster. "Yup, all of them," said young Master Han. "Then, I want to learn that." This player immediately put forth his name for registration. This one start instantly caused many others to call out the names of the monsters they wanted to learn. "Everyone, pipe down." Young Master Han was surprisingly patient. "At the moment, we're going to be teaching the fighting routine to take on the campfire patroller. Please pay close attention to it. As for developing fighting routines for other monsters, We'll be sure to put out information regarding that when the time comes, so take note of our name if you have any interest in learning those. Who are you people? Someone asked. Young Masters Elite. Young Master Han chuckled. All the players quickly remembered this name. While the reputation of Young Masters Elite preceded itself in Yunjuan City, it barely made its name beyond that region. How vicious! Gu Fei sighed to himself in awe. Young Master Han knew very well that Gu Fei would be willing to cover for the swindler, casually deciding to gift this one lesson for free given his personality. Furthermore, because he was aware that he could not possibly convince Gu Fei otherwise, young Master Han decided to simply follow along with his wishes and treat this act as a one-time promotion. In any case, their business venture would not hurt if these players before them chose to selfishly keep this news to themselves or loudly and openly promote what had happened. These players could very well turn out to be potential clients in the future or become walking advertisements. That was pretty much killing two birds with one stone. On top of that, Gu Fei further realized a huge selling point for young Master Han organizing the teaching of every sort of monsters. The players would then be repeat customers to their business. Take for example these players who are all here to learn the fighting routine for the campfire patroller. Because of the physical limitations of grinding maps, there was no way every player could do their monster grinding here now that the demand outstripped the supply. Thus, the moment a new monster was being promoted, there might actually be a large number of players who had already learned the routine for the campfire patroller that would end up learning this newer monster as well. Doing it this way, the players who had learned another fighting routine would be like gaining access to another resource to tap into. After all, the grinding maps that lacked this fighting routine would no longer be comparable in the eyes of the players. As such, these players would not call it quits after grasping a single fighting routine, and more people would opt to learn 2, 3, or even all the various fighting routines. Could it be that when he mentioned his desire to saturate the grinding maps 5 times their limit, it's solely to create such an eventuality? What are you blanking out there for? Hurry up and teach your lesson already! Young Master Han yelled at Gu Fei when the former saw how the latter had been standing there in a daze. I'll pull the monster by myself, Gu Fei said. He left the crowd and attacked a monster. Running back to the side of the outcrop, he blinked himself right up to the top. Blink was not the only way for someone to make their way to the top, and it was possible for people to climb the outcrop, albeit it looked unsightly and was far more tiresome to do so. Naturally, a monster would not balk at these. Single-mindedly chasing after Gu Fei, the campfire patroller began climbing after its target. This was when Gu Fei took 2 steps back, tilted his head slightly, and whispered, "You got to tell me which one I ought to be teaching here, right? You knew that I'm still alive?" The rocky outcrop's top was oddly shaped, and on a flat rock slanting to the sky formed a crevice against the rocky platform. From there, Ziziyoshin poked out half of her head from within. She had swiftly sought shelter there when facing the bombardment of attacks before, which was why she had not sustained heavy damage from that attempt. "What nonsense! You know just how sharp my eyes are," Gu Fei said. "Oh. Then, by your personality, are you going to throw me down there now?" Ziziyoshin asked. "If that's your wish, I don't mind granting it." "Please, no. I still want to live." "Then, you'd better hide yourself in there. The style is single-handed sword without agility," Ziziyoshin told Gu Fei. The monster had reached the flat part of the rocky outcrop by this time. Gu Fei stepped forward and called out to the crowd below. "I'm about to begin." Before he engaged with the monster. This fighting routine was developed by Eternal Dominion, and Gu Fei only picked it up from what he saw the other players were doing when he passed by. However, his standards were well beyond theirs. First, Gu Fei had already done his research about the campfire patrollers' attack patterns, so he easily grasped the fighting routine for it at a glance. In his eyes, every move and technique had a logical progression between them. As such, he did not need to rely on sheer memory, merely needing him to trace along the line of thought behind it, and Gu Fei would be able to produce a routine. Even if there were certain differences or changes from what Eternal Dominion had originally come up with, it was not too large a difference for it to be a problem. At the moment, Gu Fei was wielding a lousy single-handed sword, explaining every move he made to the crowd even as he slowly grinded that monster to death. He did not bother calling on anyone else after either, opting to run off the rocky outcrop before pulling another monster by himself, repeating the process from before. The bunch of players listened intently to his lecture. Because these players were nothing like Gufei's students, they would come forward with questions after he was done with the lessons. Thus, when Gufei killed the second monster and was about to pull the third, he complied with those who approached him. By then, quite a few players already felt that they had a good grasp of the routine and were anxious to try it out for themselves. Gufei ignored these people and continued to shave off the third monster slowly, turning to face the people after. "Have all of you gotten it?" "Yes." "Okay. Then, that's that." Gufei clapped his hands and leapt off the rocky outcrop. These players were not in the mood to curry favor and were all too eager to try the routine out themselves. Hurriedly bidding farewell, they rushed toward the monsters out there. In a flash, another group of competitors for the campfire patrollers had descended upon the wilderness camp, heralding a litany of curses and swears, which filled the air. However, Gufei was not done yet. Running off, he soon returned with another monster in tow and blinked to top the outcrop like before. Zizuyoshin had climbed out of that hiding spot she had been crouched behind by this time. Young Master Han was hardly surprised when he saw her pop out, albeit they were both a little nonplussed as to why Gufei continued to pull a monster over. "Alright, it's your turn now." Gufei said this to Zizuyoshin even as he gestured to the monster climbing toward them. Zizuyoshin was a little confused for a moment. Young Master Han massaged his temples with his fingers, lamenting to the sky above, "Sometimes, it's frightening just how inflexible this guy is." Chapter 602, Suspiciously Similar to Hacking. That was when Zizuyoshin realized that Gufei still intended to check and see if she had truly mastered the efficient monster grinding method and if she was really capable of teaching it to other players. The only reason he had covered for her earlier was to give her a chance to prove herself. If she failed, she would suffer a similar fate to being tossed out onto the angry mob before. Death was all that awaited her, except it would be Gufei himself doing the deed. "Pass me the sword, then." Zizuyoshin extended her hand to receive the lousy sword Gufei was throwing her way. The monster, which had easily clambered on the outcrop, received a blow to the head at once. The campfire patroller did not have much threat gain this time around, so a few more slashes was enough for her to leash its aggro. Taking 2 steps back, she turned to gaze at Gufei. "Watch carefully now, I won't be making any mistakes here." With that, the lady turned around and began assaulting the monster. She was using precisely the same no agility, long weapon routine Eternal Dominion had developed. Furthermore, it was obvious that her character had plenty of agility allocated to it, just like him, but for the purpose of effectively demonstrating her grasp of this fighting routine, she had limited her attack speed. Gufei's hand was already grasping his sword at this point, for he had thought that, even if she had grasped the routine, there was no way that she could show and control her attack speed like how he could. It was easy to exert full strength, but reserving a huge portion of one's power required a certain level of skill and practice. He had never expected her to achieve this, but by the looks of things, she had indeed done her homework. Just like how she had selected a bunch of players whose levels were below her, it appeared that she had similarly done plenty of practice with this particular fighting routine in order not to make any mistakes. Despite being so detestable, Gufei could deny that the lady was very conscientious when it came to swindling people. However, it was this diligence of hers that made Gufei at a loss when it came to dealing with her, and it was all because of how her dedication to swindling was similar to his dedication to kung fu. Sometimes, Gufei could not help but resonate very strongly with her. Take this instance as an example. Gufei no longer cared how Zizuyoshin fought the monster, as there was no reason she would have any problems executing the fighting routine since she had the capability to control her speed thusly. By the time she defeated the monster, his hand had already retracted from the sword. "This should be enough to teach those guys, right?" Zizuyoshin asked. "It's enough." Gufei could not help but admit this, even though the expression he showed looks no better than before. "However, since you're here." Her words hung in the air as she pulled out several bags of coins and lifted them to Gufei. Gufei could tell at a glance that these were 3 bags with 10,000 gold coins each inside and 4 bags with 1,000 gold coins each inside. "All here?" Gufei asked. 342 players, each paying 99 gold coins, Ziziotion answered. The beautiful lady here is far too courteous. Actually, you've worked hard. Young Master Han suddenly interjected from below the rocky outcrop, quite surprised to find her taking the initiative to hand over such a lump sum. It was over 30,000 gold coins. Most people would rather die once than hand over all that money. She revealed a helpless expression. I'm afraid that I won't be able to leave alive if I don't hand it over. Yes, I approve of this. This guy is really a total blockhead sometimes and completely ruthless, young Master Han commented. I don't usually see you talk so much. Gu Fei leapt right next to young Master Han. That's because if I were in her shoes, I might perhaps be willing to die once for over 30,000 gold coins. That's just you exploiting the loophole of MMOs. Ziziotion also leapt off the rocky outcrop. Young Master Han was of course aware she was referring to the respawn mechanic in game, causing the man to shake his head repeatedly. Here I was admiring you at the start, but who would have thought that? Not only do you refuse to utilize this rule, you even gave yourself a limitation regarding the use of that rule. How utterly boring. It's only interesting when playing a game with rules. Ziziotion declared. Isn't respawning a rule of MMOs? It's merely the rule of MMOs. In my game rules, protecting my life is priority number one, she answered. Young Master Han shrugged and gave his usual condescending look, not even sparing her an ounce of courtesy for her beauty. I may leave now, right? Ziziotion turned to regard Gu Fei. If you're looking to earn money, perhaps you can join us, Gu Fei suddenly offered. No thanks. What you're doing isn't my cup of tea, Ziziotion nonchalantly replied. Will you die if you don't swindle people? Gu Fei wrinkled his brows. I won't, but it will probably be similar to you not using Kung Fu, Ziziotion replied. Gu Fei was despondent. He hated how this was precisely the one thing he could be deemed as Ziziotion's kindred spirit. Bye. Ziziotion waved as she walked off. That woman's insane, young Master Han concluded. Evidently. Gu Fei was in full agreement. You're the same, too. Young Master Han of course did not let the man off. It seems that you don't want a cut of this money, huh? Gu Fei lifted the sacks of coins amounting to over 30,000 right in front of young Master Han's eyes. Young Master Han waved his hand dismissively, hamping coldly. Do you think such a pithy sum is all it takes to corrode this young master? With the money kept into Gu Fei's dimensional pocket, a sword, glistening in its dark purplish tint, appeared right before young Master Han's eyes. Alright, time to go. Young Master Han nodded. Where else are we going? Gu Fei asked. We're off to see if those rascals are seriously at work, young Master Han said. None of those rascals, as young Master Han referred to them, was skiving off on the job. After all, they were all very enthusiastic toward the prospect of making money, so aside from the issue Royal God Call had with discerning the route to his location, and the slightly lowered efficiency they provided, the other three men had already begun investigating the various maps that they had been tasked with. It was late in the afternoon when Eternal Dominion finally popped online. He had stayed up all night with Brother Assist yesterday, so while the latter could hardly wait to get back online earlier today, the former managed to get a proper sleep. Just like Gu Fei, he placed huge importance to taking care of his body. Do you know how much we made last night? Eternal Dominion sent a private message to Gu Fei once he appeared online. I heard about it, Gu Fei answered. There were 1841 players, with each of them paying 99 gold coins. Tell me how much that was in total. Excitement radiated from his words. Are you sick? Gu Fei asked. That's 182,259 gold coins. So how is it? Don't you really like seeing that number? Very frightening, isn't it? Did you get a fright? These questions came from Eternal Dominion in rapid fire. Gu Fei took a deep breath. Even though Eternal Dominion was acting a little like a maniac, the number was indeed a little hair-raising. Even that extremely beyond sword of his, Moonlit Nightfalls, had stunned the crowd to silence when Svelte Dancer belted out that sky-high bid of 20,000 gold coins. A huge sum of 180,000 coins was probably unheard of to the current players. Is all that money with you? Gu Fei asked. Yeah, Brother Assist let me hold on to it all for now. He's such a good guy. The tone of satisfaction lingered in Eternal Dominion's words. Gu Fei chuckled bitterly for a bit. Brother Assist was of course not a bad person, But that did not necessarily mean that he was that much of a good person. He was simply aware of the important roles Eternal Dominion and Gufei played in this venture. There was no doubt that the two of them were at the very core of this fighting routine, and nothing would be remotely possible without the two of them there, which meant that it was necessary to give them the sweetest slice of the proverbial pie. Gufei did not wish to analyze his friends to this degree, but he simply could not help it. When everything solely hinged on profits, there was no choice but to do it like such. Ahem. So has he told you about his plan of working together with a few others? Gufei asked. Yup. There's a little change to our business strategy. Gufei imparted the tyrannical strategy young Master Han had improved onto Eternal Dominion. Awesome. Eternal Dominion was in absolute awe with the new plan, all the more experiencing just how crude that first promotion attempt he had executed was. So what are we gonna do now? Eternal Dominion was in high spirits right now, eager to dig straight into work. Head over to the wilderness camp and earn as much we can earn from here, Gufei replied. Got it. I am on my way. Gufei and young Master Han found themselves back in the wilderness camp after they finished their visit to all the other grinding maps. Now standing atop the 9,527 rocky outcrop no one else dared to occupy. The impact these bootleggers had was indeed vicious, and countless self-proclaimed masters had already sprung up all over the wilderness camp, fighting for survival in the cutthroat market as they competed against one another with great intensity. Meanwhile, Gufei's group continued to stick to their 99 gold coin price tag, a tall tree that was standing shoulders above the rest. 9 out of 10 players that came merely did so to check out the legendary 1000 Miles Drunk, while those that came to ask about the price hesitantly left when they saw how empty the venue was. Young Master Han had nothing much to say as well, merely showing a mirthless smile in the face of such a scene. Instead, it was Eternal Dominion who felt uneasy the moment he arrived and saw how empty the place was compared to the crowd present yesterday. In his anxiety, Eternal Dominion asked, "Why is it like this? Why isn't there anyone? There's even a lesson going for 20 gold coins out there now," Gufei answered. HMPH. Which is why none of these people is worth any bit of salt. Essentially, none of them can come up with any other methods besides lowering their prices to compete with the others. Nothing but a bunch of idiots. Young Master Han spat with scathing disdain. What other methods can they employ? Gufei asked. Just like what that lady from before did, dress up to impersonate you. That alone is already an extremely effective method, young Master Han replied. So what do we do now, lower our price as well? Eternal Dominion hurriedly asked. Nope. Young Master Han was calm. Wilderness camp is no more than a farce now. We're only here for posturing. Rest at ease, our real market has yet to open. It truly is quite farcical. Gufei stood atop the 9,527 rocky outcrop and got quite a view of the place, muttering to himself, the wilderness camp is truly in too much of a mess. Compared to the impact these bootleggers had on Gufei and the lot, it was the ramifications of Gufei's efficient fighting routine that was far more significant to the entire grinding map. After an entire day had passed, news of what had happened spread across all Beishi City. Players above level 40 all swarmed to the wilderness camp and flooded the entire map. As long as a player grasped the fighting routine, campfire patrollers would essentially be able to provide them with thrice the experience they could earn fighting other monsters. Why would any player take issue with this? Even those players who were used to grinding in parties and would never deign to glance at this sort of solo grinding maps had all wised up and headed over as well. Young Master Han was standing right beside Gufei at the moment. Using his spyglass to take the sight in this grinding map, his understanding of the phenomenon went deeper than Gufei's. Many players right now were still in the learning stage. Demonstrations and lessons only required a single monster, and a majority of the other players crowded around to see it. Once everybody had gotten a grasp of this particular routine, things would really get boisterous as each of them plunged right into it. At the moment, having about 3 or 4 monsters was enough for each player to grind on endlessly, but the moment they mastered the routine, their efficiency would increase, and each player might very well require 7, 8, or even more monsters before they would be sated. Adding the fact that the players doing this monster grind would increase. Seeing this scene perpetually buzzing with activity, perhaps we'll have to pick up the pace regarding our business. There doesn't seem to be anything more here, Why don't I hold out here and you two take this time to research the routine for other monsters? Young Master Han decided. But what if someone comes by? Eternal Dominion had yet to give up, unconvinced that the business surging with clients yesterday would become so empty and forlorn over a single night. Then, I'll immediately inform you two to come back, young Master Han said. Sure. Gu Fei nodded, and the two bolted off. How are things with you guys? Young Master Han sent a message over to Sword Demon and the others. We're almost there. Where are you? Sword Demon asked. Over by the 9527 outcrop, young Master Han responded. Sometime soon, young Master Han saw Sword Demon, War Without Wounds, and Royal God Call making their way to this landmark through his spyglass. Thanks for your hard work. Seated atop the outcrop, young Master Han expressed his sympathy as the three got closer. None of the three men felt good when they heard his tone. Casually reciprocating his greeting, each of them began their climb atop the rocky outcrop and gazed out at the surrounding scenery before them. Not one man spoke a word, so everything was quiet for a good while. Don't this sort of fighting routine Gu Fei came up with remind you guys of something? Finally, it was Sword Demon who had opened his mouth. War Without Wounds and Royal God Call exchanged glances. It was apparent they had their answer, or perhaps they shared Sword Demon's sentiment, and the thief had only beat them to voicing it out. What you mean to say is? The two did not answer the query right away, letting Sword Demon express his thoughts first. Hacking. Sword Demon was not courteous like the other two. The two men were silent. Evidently, they shared the same thought. Of course, the fact is this isn't hacking, most definitely not. I just don't understand why I cannot help but think of hacking, Sword Demon explained. That's exactly it. War Without Wounds and Royal God Call nodded in agreement. They were all gaming veterans, so they naturally had abundant knowledge in all things related to MMOs, thus, their line of thinking would all go in the same track. What do you think? Sword Demon asked young Master Han. It's definitely not hacking, young Master Han said, but it's precisely more frightening because it's not done through a cheating program and whatnot. Indeed. Sword Demon concurred. So I have such a thought precisely because this isn't hacking, yet its effect is very similar to hacking? No, I mean that this is far more fearsome than hacking. The officials have many methods to counter and limit hacking, but against something like this, what can they do? Have an overhaul of all the monsters and redesign them from scratch? What a joke! Given the present technological capacities, creating monsters with this AI caliber is already the limit. Miles will still be able to come up with an efficient grinding routine no matter how they change things, young Master Han said. So when Fleeting Smile said that he wants to rectify Miles, it's actually rather reasonable, no? War Without Wounds asked. Sword Demon and Royal God Call were silent for quite some time, as if they were ruminating on this question. This was when young Master Han chuckled coldly. What shitty reason is that? Miles is a human being and not a machine. It's just this game being too goddamn trash. If anything needs rectifying, it's their game. The three men wiped sweat off their foreheads. Was he not saying 1 moment ago how the game makers were already on the brink of their technological capacities? That meant that they were akin to clever spouses that could create meals sans rice. Yet young Master Han was now cursing the game for being too trashy. Brother Assist's original plan here was quite simple, and it's your intervention that raised the bar to the next level. Are you trying to openly challenge that guy? Sword Demon asked. What nonsense! Can that fool be worth yours truly specifically challenging him? This is merely the legitimate path we have to riches, which happens to leave him dead without a grave, young Master Han said matter-of-factly. The three were wiping their sweat off their foreheads yet again. Furthermore, young Master Han's accusing gaze swiveled onto Sword Demon. Is yours truly's plan merely just raising the bar to the next level? Just one? How are you not dead yet? Sword Demon asked, his face black with anger. Miles isn't be aware of all this, right? Royal God Call asked. Young Master Han nodded. That guy doesn't have that deep understanding of MMOs, so there's certainly no way he'd realize all these many details so soon. You guys should be nice and not to mention it to him, either. There's no telling what crazy things that guy'll do once he gets all strange about things like what he usually does. Aren't you the one who often goes crazy? The three said the same thing at once. Damn it. Are you guys done collecting all the information I requested? Young Master Han changed the subject. The three each produced their collected information regarding the level 40 grinding maps around Beishi City even as they described what they had seen. Because of the sudden rise of the wilderness camp, several of Beishi City's major grinding maps became somewhat uninhabited to the point that even those players still grinding there felt that there were few people about that day. Of course, plenty of these players had no idea of what was happening at the wilderness camp, while all those in the know had already come rushing over without a moment's hesitation. At the moment, everything is only affecting Beishi City's region. I reckon that the news will soon spread all over Parallel World. Brother Assist is now online, Sword Demon said. Brothers, I'm back. Brother Assist was in high spirits, a clear sign of his success advertising on the forums. Thanks for your hard work. Young Master Han messaged. Brother Assist could already imagine the man's temperament while saying those words and felt a rush of uneasiness. It would be a sort of tragedy if anyone had such a boss in real life, for he could easily brush off any semblance of achievement someone felt with his words alone, causing the person in question to feel regret for the effort they had put. How are things on everyone's end? Brother Assist asked. Everything is going as planned, they replied. All of them tacitly did not mention anything regarding the topic of hacking on the mercenary channel as Gufei could read what was shown in the chat, too. What Smiles up to? Brother Assist asked. Development. Gufei answered. Where at? Brother Assist asked. The Sand Walls, Gufei answered him. The Sand Walls was a major map right outside Beishi City where a host of sand bandits resided. These monsters differed from the campfire patrollers in that, although they shared the same name, there were various versions of them, consisting of all the job classes seen in Parallel World. These monsters were scattered all over the Sand Walls, sometimes alone and occasionally in packs. What made them all the more powerful was that these packs had job classes that complement one another, just like how a party of players would form themselves. It was a grinding map that players would often form parties to grind levels. People would have quite a hard time solo grinding there. That place, huh? Brother Assist obviously know what the situation was like there. The monsters there have so many different occupations. Which one are you going for? Whatever I can get my hands on. I'll research each of them at once. Gufei replied. Look. Young Master Han said to the three men beside him. Such an intelligent cheating program. Brother Assist, for his part, began analyzing this from a business perspective. We can actually put the research on hold when it comes to such party grinding maps. Instead, we should focus on solo grinding maps like the White Mill. Chapter 603, still this same development. The White Mill? Okay. We'll head over to take a look. Gufei returned the message, hurrying over to White Mill with Eternal Dominion in tow. How about us? What do we do now? The others asked. Just stay and watch. A good show might soon play out here, young Master Han answered lightly. It was just as young Master Han had said. Once the news began to spread, the number of players congregating in the wilderness camp rapidly increased. Perhaps there were still some who were a little skeptical regarding this efficient monster grinding method, but the moment they set foot on the wilderness camp and saw how crowded it was, every bit of doubt in their minds vanished. The players pirating Gufei and Gang's routine were all smiles right now. Seeing waves after waves of potential students coming, they no longer worried about running out of business. Furthermore, when they saw how people were eager to pay but unable to find any available instructor, these bootleggers who were only concerned with their immediate profits all began to raise their prices. Now that the worry was with the supply of instructors for the routine rather than the number of students looking to be taught, these bootleggers were all emboldened. The fees they charged soared along with increasing waves. Forget the 20 gold coins price they had been touting before. Even the 99 gold coin price Gufei's group had initially set could be deemed as cheap in the face of these inflated prices. This was a situation which even young Master Han had not expected could happen. They had only learned of this when some of the players shopping around for prices passed by the 9,527 rocky outcrop and suspiciously sized up the four silly-looking players standing atop it. Bro, what are you all doing? Someone asked out of curiosity. Efficient monster grinding routine. 99 gold coins per person, young Master Han casually answered, not even sparing the people below a glance. He had answered this question countless of times, and the players who had heard his answer all called him crazy for charging such a high price before turning to leave. 99 gold coins. That's so cheap. Someone below the outcrop shouted, alarming young Master Han to the point that he nearly came sliding off the rock. Young Master Han quickly put down the spyglass in his hands to glimpse at the customers below. 99 gold coins is considered cheap? Just what's going on? There were 5 players below the rocky outcrop, and all of them showed excitement once they heard the price. Furthermore, with the player shouting it like that, another bunch of players came running over, yelling as they ran, a cheap price of 99 gold coins. Where is this place? Could this be a scam? Young Master Han quickly made sense of what had happened. The bootleggers had probably gotten carried away and actually began raising the price when they saw the host of players descending on the wilderness camp. How much is it up there now? Young Master Han asked, randomly pointing at a few other sites where players were being taught the routine. They have all priced it at over 200 gold coins. A player below the outcrop answered. How ruthless, young Master Han commented. Since the player's standard of living had improved, especially with this particular business venture targeting players level 40 and up, most could afford pulling out a few hundred gold coins like this. But for those unlucky players who had not managed to loot any decent drops throughout their time in Parallel World, their life savings could very well only amount to a total of several hundred god coins. Naturally, the alternative of a 99 gold coin price tag was much easier for players to stomach than a one-time expenditure of 200 gold coins. With a 99 gold coins price tag, just what are you guys teaching? Several players who had come by upon hearing the news about lessons being priced at 99 gold coins were still skeptical. They had no idea what had happened here in the wilderness camp the other day. Relax, no one else out there is more genuine than us, young Master Han assured. Can you first demonstrate it for us to see? One of the potential customers suggested a test as clarification. Sorry, but we're temporarily not starting up lesson until we reach the required number of participants, young Master Han said firmly. Required number? A player looked around and saw that this location was among those deserted sites that lessons were being held. Speaking of which, the 9527 outcrop was considered as one of farther locations out here in the wilderness camp. Players who had no idea what was going on would usually end up streaming to places with more people, and very few would end up passing by this place. That was why it took quite some time before people discovered young Master Han's low price of 99 gold coins. How many do you need? Someone asked. 1,000 should do. Young Master Han had quite the appetite. You're insane. Someone objected. This person had been to several areas, and none had anywhere near 1,000 students. For the space we got here, 1,000 is already considered low. Young Master Han pointed around the 9527 outcrop where they were the only ones present. None of the average players was bothered by any of this. Their only concern was being able to learn the efficient monster grinding routine themselves, so the crowd clamored and demanded for the lesson to begin immediately. Furthermore, the 9527 outcrop, which had always been deserted due to its remoteness. This sudden gathering of people only resulted in more to stream in as more players came by the moment they heard that lessons were being taught here for 99 gold coins each. Many quickly joined the crowd, rowdily demanding for the lesson to start. Actually, young Master Han had no need to stick to the 1,000 players he claimed, but with neither Gufei nor Eternal Dominion around, there was no way that they could teach these players anything. Was there? When these players exclaimed about how cheap the 99 gold coin price tag was, young Master Han easily understood what was about to happen and hastened to call Gufei and Eternal Dominion back. Now, all young Master Han could do was stall for time. Everyone, please settle down. Since you guys have been around this place for some time now, I'm sure you all are aware about the existence of two types of fighting routine. Those interested in learning the no agility variant should stand on my left, whereas those interested in learning the agility variant should stand on my right. Young Master Han shouted. In the end, there were those exceptional players who were new to everything, and with none of them having any clue about the two variants, they got a look of contempt once they asked about it. Yet young Master Han was more than happy to find more chances to stall for time. Slowly and steadily, he patiently explained everything to these players. The others were impatient, and it was almost to the point that every word young Master Han uttered would be punctuated by a disdainful snort or a dissatisfied clicking of the tongue. Young Master Han was surprisingly patient about it. Whenever these people made noise, he would instantly climb up and wait until their complaints were over before starting from the top. Everyone was on the verge of breaking when this happened, no longer daring to make a racket as they mutely listened to everything young Master Han had to say as they learned what they had been told about all over again. During this whole time, more and more players made their way over to the 9527 outcrop. Before young Master Han could say anything to these newcomers, the other players swiftly explained to them. It's 99 gold coins, those with agility should head to the left, and those without should go to the right. Hurry! The look on Sword Demon and the others slowly changed, no longer seeing these people below the rock as players but 99 gold coins. Instead, there were so many 99s right now, so many that they struggled to count them all. The War Without Wounds was a little agitated. The collection of all the gold coins here is gonna be rather troublesome. There are too many people, how are we gonna remember who paid and who didn't? Brother Assist, how did you guys do it yesterday? Sword Demon asked over the mercenary channel. Hey, we had registration forms yesterday, which doubled as tickets for this portion. Brother Assist was delighted. After making a record of every registration form he received, he returned them to their owners as ticket stubs upon payment. Even though Brother Assist could not be certain that there were no free riders that managed to mix in the crowd when the lessons began, he was at least able to collect fees from all those who had submitted forms to him, so he was not about to nitpick about the handful of players that were looking to fish in troubled waters. At the very least, it was much better than the current predicament that Sword Demon and the others found themselves in. With the situation at hand, we'll just play it by ear. There aren't too many people right now, and we've got quite a few pairs of hands here, so we should be able to manage. God damn it, can you get your ass here already, Miles? Young Master Han swept his eyes through the crowd and saw that there were already over hundreds of players gathered. It was still far from the 1,000 players he had initially asked for, but if they really reached such a number, they would surely have a huge problem collecting money in this hubbub. Why aren't we starting yet? The queries from below continued piling up. Are there anyone with any other questions? Young Master Han asked with a genial smile. No. The crowd called back. In the end, young Master Han pointed in a certain direction and asked, please speak freely. The crowd all turned, only to find a player with a raised hand. Apparently, he responded to young Master Han's question when they were asked about further questions. Everyone had the thought of tearing this man into shreds. This person shrank back a little from the attention, but he still steeled himself and asked his question. How much? 99 gold coins. The bellow from the crowd drowned this man out almost instantly. Meanwhile, young Master Han continued to smile as he stood atop the outcrop, completely unaffected as he replied, that's right. It's 99 a person. Begin already. Everyone continued to urge in unison. Since everyone is so passionate about this, fine. We'll break our rule and begin lesson even though there are so few of you present. Young Master Han was showing a very magnanimous expression as he addressed the crowd. Could everyone please hand their money over? With a quick glance at Sword Demon and the others, he watched them leap off the rocky outcrop. Young Master Han had already made prior arrangement on the mercenary channel to get these people to collect the money at a slower pace, believing that it should be enough to stall for time until Gufei arrived at the scene. What are we stalling for? Can't we just tell these people that the instructor isn't here yet? Royal God Call asked. Didn't you already see how suspicious they are of us with our 99 gold coin fee, which they consider as a low price? If we were to also mention that the instructor isn't here, would they still believe us? Young Master Han asked. Yes, that's right. The issue of trust is very important. Brother Assist was no stranger to this. After all, he had spent ample time collecting money from players last night. At the end of the day, this was not a transaction completed with an exchange of goods. Plenty of players were so wary they incessantly radiated with the impulse to kill people. Sure enough, the moment young Master Han mentioned that they were collecting fees, someone was immediately ruffled and shouted, "Give us a demonstration first." It was entirely reasonable for clients to inspect the goods first. Young Master Han could not come up with any excuse, so he nodded. Alright, may I trouble someone to come and pull a monster over? There were bound to be proactive players regarding this sort of task, so someone ran out at once to do just that. Soon, this person was back with a monster in tow. Young Master Han nodded. Get it up here. He had witnessed this not too long ago and knew that the average gamer would be unable to accurately throw the monster up the rocky outcrop so easily, which meant that this would aid them in dragging things out a little more. Young Master Han's scheme succeeded once more. The whole lot of players tried everything they could to get the monster up, killing up to 3 during this whole time, and not one managed to make it even halfway up the rocky outcrop. Sword Demon and the others had a hard time watching this. Finally, someone could no longer hold himself back and yelled, "Since you are the ones who had chosen this place, you guys should be responsible for getting the monster up." "Fine, we'll do it." Young Master Han briskly gave his answer, for he had already spotted Gu Fei's black figure in the distance. "Pull a monster over." Young Master Han sent this message to Gu Fei and watched the man casually flick his sword at a monster he passed by even as he hurried over. Meanwhile, the crowd heard young Master Han's answer yet saw none of the men moving to do just that. They were about to ask again when someone saw Gu Fei running through with a monster in tow and blinking right up the rocky outcrop. As young Master Han moved himself to the side to make way for Gu Fei as he messaged him via the mercenary channel. "This is a demonstration. Make it a sight to behold but not to the point where others can learn it by looking." Once he sent that message, young Master Han walked to the front and began leading the clapping. "The demonstration is about to begin. Please give a round of applause." The players were dazed as they all clapped, momentarily confused just why a black-robed mage had come running out of nowhere. Gu Fei very courteously gave a martial arts salute to the players gathered below the rocky outcrop and began his demonstration right away. He did not hold too much back, nor did he go overboard and use twin incineration. Gu Fei simply and swiftly followed the routine he had created until the monster was dead before turning to the crowd with a big smile. That doesn't seem like it." Someone expressed his doubts. "Yeah, you move so quickly, I bet you've got quite the agility." "Why would you be using the long weapon if you've got agility?" Although these players had yet to learn a thing, they truly had quite a bit of understanding of what was happening. Gu Fei smiled brightly. "This is a routine that we use solely for demonstration purposes. We're all experts here, so we can see the technique within. Forget about the weapon type or agility. I'm sure all you experts here have already noted just how efficient I was. If you guys decide to learn this, I'll make sure to teach the 2 routines everybody requests accordingly." A number of players below were not exactly experts like what Gu Fei had pegged them to be, but hearing them being addressed as such made these people extremely elated and were more than satisfied to pay up for the lesson. Sword Demon and the 2 others thought about how shameless Gu Fei was while they collected money. Young Master Han asked him not to put on a demonstration that prevented their audience from learn anything just from watching it, so the man simply pulled out a 3rd routine: long weapon with agility. While it might not sound like much, would anyone, who did not have a certain je ne sais quoi like Gu Fei, even dare to mess around like this? In the end, the money they had been tasked to collect seemed endless because more and more players came streaming to them without any signs of stopping. The place was deserted before because no one was around, so more and more people began flocking over to this location now that there was a clear crowd gathered, and the newer players had come and asked about prices and many other such questions. It got to a point where those who had paid ended up waiting for a long time yet still did not learn a thing yet. Each of them was red with anxiety, looking behind them frequently. Rather than checking to see if more players were making their way over like before, they were all checking to see if they had stopped. "Do we really have to wait till we hit 1,000? Someone cried out. Gu Fei had a bird's eye view of everything that was transpiring, and by the way things were going, he could tell that it would not just be 1,000 players. Just like last night, it might snowball into a 2,000 strong mob. "Why don't we do it like this?" Young Master Han came to Gu Fei's side and spoke. "You keep teaching them and we keep collecting fees. The players in front will be asked to leave once they learn everything, and the ones behind can take over their spots right after." Gu Fei gave him the side eye. "Are you asking me to keep instructing forever? I'll let you rest for 10 minutes every 45 minutes. You're a teacher, you should be used to this." Young Master Han said. Do you believe I'll immediately punch you down? Gu Fei asked. Can't you see it? Don't you see how passionate this crowd is? Young Master Han pointed to the players who continued to gather below the 9,527 outcrop from a distance away. If this is going to be how it is all the time, I'm afraid that me and Eternal Dominion alone won't be able to cope, Gu Fei said. Which is why I suggested scaling up our operation as part of the plan. But the situation at hand now is an emergency. Do you know why? Because those bootleggers began raising the prices when they saw more and more people coming over to learn your routine. It has gotten to a point where 99 gold coins is considered as the lowest price out there, young Master Han said. How troublesome. Gu Fei wrinkled his brows. This business venture looked to be far more complex than he had thought, and it was ultimately because the benefits that came from this were simply abundant. That is why you gotta work hard a bit. Young Master Han said. But how am I supposed to swap between the two routines with this unending lesson plan you proposed? Gu Fei pointed to the two clear masses of players gathered below them. Where's Eternal Dominion? Young Master Han asked. Still on the road. I have a faster movement speed, Gu Fei answered. You'll teach one type first, then you'll swap accordingly, young Master Han said. Brother Assist can do this, too, Gu Fei said. Eternal Dominion told him that Brother Assist had learned the no agility fighting routine previously. He even had the luxury of a one-to-one tutoring with Eternal Dominion for this. Quick, go call over Brother Assist as well, young Master Han said. You, too. I'll be teaching the long weapon no agility fighting routine. You can learn it as well, Gu Fei said. Fighting and killing. Young Master Han showed a look of apparent disdain. I'll go get more without wounds. They are still collecting fees, Gu Fei reminded. This was when both men realized that just young Master's Elite's 7 men and Eternal Dominion might not be enough to handle everything in this business venture. Let's get started on this first. We'll think of solutions later. Gu Fei was helpless. It's time to begin. Young Master Han was quick and to the point, instantly announcing this to the people gathered below the rocky outcrop. A round of applause sounded. What are you declaring for? We haven't even lured a monster yet. Gu Fei scorned even as he leapt off to locate a monster. With a monster in tow, Gu Fei blinked atop the rock and took his time to point out to the group of players mainly comprised no agility warriors while the monster was climbing up the rocky outcrop. I'll be teaching the no agility, long weapon fighting routine now. Please take note. The respective group gave a thunderous cheer, while the other group was in low spirits. To make learning easier for everyone, I'll intentionally be slowing down my tempo and reducing my damage, Gu Fei said as disclaimer, or else someone just might end up asking where his efficiency went. Soon, Gu Fei was able to vanquish the monster using his fighting routine, so he called out, all right. Everyone can go grab their monsters and practice in their own for a bit. You can come back a little later. Next, I'll be teaching you guys. Gu Fei pointed to the short weapon, agility-based group of players mostly consisted of thieves. Fuck, don't you mess around here. If people leave and return, there's no way we will know those who have paid and not. War without wounds and the others were bellowing their lungs out across the mercenary channel. They had been collecting so much money that their hands were sore from doing the task. With them already doing their best to memorize which players had and had not paid, Gu Fei saying such convoluted things from the rocky outcrop about a bunch of their customers going and returning later, mixing with those who had yet to pay. There was no way they would not have a strong reaction. How could they keep track of those who paid and those who did not if that truly happened? Ultimately, even those players who had heard Gu Fei's suggestion remained where they were. There were people piled up behind them right now, so being at the front, they were already fortunate enough. If they left now, nobody would save them their prime spots. Thus, absolutely nobody moved, and the crowd simply yelled, just do it. Give it all to us at one go. Gu Fei was stunned. Armed with this foreknowledge now, the other group of players, which mostly comprised of thieves, waiting to learn the short weapon agility routine felt that Gu Fei's approach of a little column A and a little column B made it such that everyone suffered, so they nodded in agreement. Teach them everything first. We're in no rush. Actually, these people had their intentions. Even though this was not the fighting routine that they were after, being able to watch like this meant that they could learn it as well. So even if it was useless, The fact that they would learn more made it feel as if they had gotten double the benefits. Besides, if they were to set up their classes and earn a little money on the side afterwards, it would be great if they could teach 2 sets of routine by themselves. Gufei did not guess these people's deep thoughts about the matter, so all he did was follow their wishes and taught them accordingly. After teaching the left, teach the right. Once the right was done, he was back to teaching the left. The crowd that amassed right under the 9,527 outcrop slowly went beyond the 2,000 player threshold that they had seen last night, yet this number continued to climb steadily. Chapter 604, Unclear of the Situation. Eternal Dominion, who had finally made it over to the 9,527 rocky outcrop, could barely contain his excitement when facing this ever-burgeoning and thronging crowd. He did not even show a bit of resistance like what Gufei had done and just grabbed hold of a monster on his way through. Eternal Dominion leapt right up the rocky outcrop, rolled up his sleeves, and yelled, "Tag me in!" Gufei, who had just finished a round of lessons at this time, heaved a sigh of relief. Taking 2 steps backward, he collapsed directly on the ground. Eternal Dominion was perpetually bursting with vibrant energy as he took over Gufei's seemingly endless lessons. The players below received a jolt to their senses as well, and their impression toward Gufei and his bunch deepened. To think that they actually have 2 instructors to do shifts. How impressive! With such an established and profound teaching source to tap from, adding on the lowest price of 99 gold coins, everyone present willingly helped Gufei's group advertise. Cheap price and sufficiently staffed. We like it all. You guys like it, huh? I'm just gonna lie here for a bit. Gufei mumbled to himself even as he heard the cheers from below. As the sounds from the 9,527 outcrop grew louder and louder, their presence slowly became like an assault to the bootleg industry. For an authentic product to be half the price of the bootleg version, imagine just how competitive this would be. As a result, plenty of people willingly waited and only offered the word "scram" to those bootleggers that were looking to offer their lessons to them. Slowly but surely, the number of potential students on the bootleggers end dwindled, and only players who were looking to save time and did not mind the higher prices were willing to patronize their business. This was hardly satisfactory to these bootleggers. They missed that earlier period when business was booming, and they were all being pestered like gurus. But now, not only did they have to take the initiative to hawk their services to potential clients, many of those they approached ended up sending them off with a single scram. What's going on? These people had been competing with one another before, but when they realized how the situation had gone awry, they could not help but gather for a discussion. Actually, after working for quite some time, these players' pockets were lined deep enough with gold coins that they could figuratively jingle as they ran. However, money was just the sort of thing no one would complain about earning more, and these bootleggers were feeling particularly discontented when they saw how there was more money to be made, yet all of it found their way into someone else's pockets. It's that 9,527 rocky outcrop. Their price is still the same as ever, 99 gold coins. One of them had already gone over and gotten a good grasp of the situation. 1,000 miles drunk Sponge is back again. Someone moaned. The newer players might have no idea, but these bootleggers were all participants of the initial demonstration, so they absolutely knew the entire situation, including the existence of that third routine of the agility long weapon Gufei had shown. These people were thinking rather simple and plainly at first conception. Figuring that Gufei would have no way of instructing like he did for 24 hours straight, their initial plan was simply to feed off the table scraps while he was away. But the moment they started their business, they quickly realized just how succulent and sizable this meat they had bitten into was. It was so big that Gufei and his gang would have no way of eating the entire piece all by themselves, even if they were to run their venture 24/7. Thus, they no longer satisfied themselves with mere table scraps and openly vied for a slice of the proverbial pineapple, becoming more and more delighted as they fought. It was almost to the point of them forgetting about the existence of the founder, Gufei. As a result, now that Gufei had reappeared from his hiatus, even though these bootleggers could still get some business, it devolved from the prime cut to the rump meat. It was truly excruciating. That guy. Look at how great things are right now. Why is he still adamant on that 99 gold coin price tag of his? What a dumbass. These pirates each criticized. If this is how he'll do business, How are we going to do ours? Another person complained miserably. In fact, these bootleggers' prices were all at the same range. Even though they seemed to be competing, none of them were truly entangling with one another. In the beginning, they were all competing by keeping their prices low, forcing the others to see no business if they do not follow suit, which was why they fought like dogs and ruined their bottom lines. Later, when the business boomed, someone tried increasing their price and saw that it barely affected the demand. Naturally, the others were more avid about following closely when there was money to be made, and slowly, everybody increased their prices to the point that it reached somewhere around 200 gold coins. Some greedier individuals were even getting ready to increase their prices right into the 300s, but the sudden intrusion of Gufei's 99 gold coins stopped them dead in their tracks, causing all of them to feel even more dejected. We don't have a choice. We just got to lower our prices again. Someone sighed despondently. He had only managed to get himself 4 clients all this while. Thus, even though each of them was willing to fork out 200 gold coins, all he managed to make was 800 gold coins, with him being limited to 4 at a time. Anyone else would be laughing their way to the bank if they got such a high rate of earnings, but because this man had experienced that bout of prosperity hours ago, this 800 gold coins now felt a little underwhelming. Perhaps, if he reduced to 99 gold coins, he could gain more students and ultimately average out to earn more. Don't panic. Another waved his hand dismissively. I think that 1,000 miles drunk should have a good idea what's going on by now. Yeah? Could he perhaps be thinking that this business has the potential to last? Take us for example. Didn't we pivot toward making a quick buck instead of grinding our levels after we learn the routines? There are only going to be more and more players like us as more and more people are taught of this routine, which means that the competition will become even stiffer at that point. It is only a matter of time until this business is picked clean to its bones. Now is the best time to make a killing and leave before it all goes to shit. At this time, for this routine to get to 200, even if it goes 300 or 400 gold coins per person, why won't the players be interested? 1,000 miles drunk must surely be making such a huge blunder to insist on that fixed rate of 99 gold coins. Isn't he trying to make things difficult for us? Come, let's go and have a talk with him. The man led the way once he gave his speech, but none of the people behind him moved. This person looked back at the others he had been conversing with, only to see them all staring at him. Someone voiced out, "Do you have any idea what the situation you're in? That guy's 1,000 miles drunk, and you're looking to negotiate with him? Are you thinking of using your lips or your sword, huh?" That person smiled. What's there to be afraid of? Isn't he looking to earn some gold as well by setting up this business? I'll give him a cost-benefit analysis, which he can benefit from, as well as help him earn more. Why should I be afraid? These people found what he had said to be reasonable and thus nodded. Let's go, then. Still, someone hesitated. I still have 3 players awaiting me to reach them. Who gives a rat's ass about those 3? Once we're done with our chat, there's going to be a whole bunch of players lining up to be taught. Let those guys wait a while. The man who had said this was spirited, evident showing just how confident and deeply knowledgeable he was regarding the situation at hand. Over at the 9527 rocky outcrop, the players were obediently lining on the left and right respectively, leaving a path open right in the middle. This path was used for luring monsters, so everybody made sure not to stand in the way. When these bootleg vendors made their way over, Sword Demon and a lot were still too confused and disoriented collecting the crowd's fees. There were simply too many people for the 3 to deal with everything that was happening, and it was very likely for many players to have made it past them without paying as they worked their way through the crowd, but none of these 3 men cared for those that got away. Seeing another group of men directly barreling through the crowd the moment they arrived, the 3 could hardly be bothered to head over and accost them. These bootleggers followed along the path used for pulling the monsters and strode forth. The surrounding players wrinkled their brows when they saw their impropriety, yet no one said a word about it. When this handful of bootleggers made their way to the base of the 9527 outcrop and moved to climb up it, they saw Eternal Dominion teaching above. They were, after all, looking to discuss this in private. The crowd was sure to skin them alive if they were to shout everything in front of them amid their lesson. The crowd burst into a thunderous applause when they saw those bootleggers climb up, giving them such a fright that 3 of the bunch slipped down the rocky outcrop. Discussions ran wild among the crowd. How indomitable! To think they have so many instructors, they truly are pricing this cheaply while being sufficiently staffed. When the players saw those people began their ascent to the outcrop the moment they got there, the crowd instantly made the mental correlation between how Gufei and Eternal Dominion had arrived before and automatically assumed they were also instructors coming to lend a hand as a result. Of course, these bootleggers were clueless on what was happening right now, so when they turned to see the crowd's cheers and hopeful gazes, they were all baffled. What they were about to do should garner the hate of the masses. Instead, what were they all looking at them so happily for? With this question bouncing about in their minds, these men finally reached the top of the rocky outcrop. Up on 9527, Eternal Dominion was conscientiously teaching the masses, while young Master Han was taking swigs from his bottle of liquor 2 meters behind him, looking absolutely at ease as he sat there drinking. Several steps away from the man was a black-robed mage sprawled on the surface, looking utterly unseemly. A good portion of young Master Han's focus was on that bottle he was holding, not even paying much attention to the situation below the rocky outcrop. He only realized what was happening when those men completed their climb. Eternal Dominion, who had already spotted the men while they were making their climb up, merely popped a question once they made it all the way to this spot. "What are you guys up here for? Can't you see things clearly from below?" The leader smiled. "Oh, no, we're not here to learn. We have something to discuss with you guys." "What's the matter?" Young Master Han opened his mouth to ask. When Eternal Dominion heard young Master Han take this conversation, he no longer bothered with these newcomers and devoted his full attention to the lesson he was giving. "May I know which one of you is 1,000 miles drunk?" the man asked, his eyes already locked onto Gufei's prone body. Everybody knew that 1,000 miles drunk was a mage. It was obvious by the attires Eternal Dominion and young Master Han had respectively just what their job classes were. Gufei had already raised his head to look at these men when they first spoke, so when he heard them say that they were looking for him, he hurriedly gathered himself from his messy state and stood before them looking as prim and proper as he could. "I'm 1,000 miles drunk." "What business do you have with me?" The other party was delighted at how he had responded, taking it as if 1,000 miles drunk was showing them respect by addressing them so formally. The person at the front took the initiative once more to speak for his group. "Ha ha. Excuse us, but we're simply those people teaching this thing here over yonder." He pointed to the distant grounds even as he gestured at Eternal Dominion's demonstration. Hearing the man use the word thing made Gufei feel extremely unhappy. Even though this routine was hardly considered as kung fu, it would nevertheless still utilize the knowledge that came from it, otherwise, would most gamers not have discovered it before? Thus, hearing others casually referring to it as a thing really rubbed Gufei wrongly. "Well, speak your mind." Aside from this, Gufei really did not mind these men earning money by pirating this routine. "It's like this, you guys seem to still be pricing this at 99 gold coins." The person began. "That's right." That man flashed an awkward smile. "You guys don't actually have to do that. Given how things stand now, not many people have a good grasp of this grinding method, so it's very clearly still a seller's market. Despite us pricing it at over 200 gold coins, there's still a clear demand for this routine, but now that you guys are selling it at 99 gold coins. Actually, we can all still be earning quite a tidy sum if we price it at 200, 300, or even 400 gold coins. However, this situation isn't gonna last for long, so what we ought to do now is to hurry and capitalize on this as best as we can, while we can." "Bro, seeing how many people are here, I gather that there are about 3 to 5,000 players, yeah? Think about it, if each of them pays 99 gold coins, just how much more can you make when it's at 299 gold coins, instead?" The man himself salivated at his description. He even got quite the scare as he did a mental calculation. Several thousand players. His business had yet to reach such heights. Even though he was a forerunning bootlegger in this business, The truth was that the area of his operation was not exactly ideal. It was no way comparable to the scale of the 9527 outcrop. It was unknown when young Master Han had surreptitiously inserted himself into this conversation, but before Gu Fei could even respond, young Master Han was already beside this speaker and was patting his shoulder. "You sure know how to talk, bro." The man noted the devilish looks of young Master Han when he came forward. Were it not for his very masculine voice when he spoke, the man would never believe that young Master Han was a man. After he collected himself, he finally responded, "Surely you jest. However, gentlemen, do any of you know this routine's origin?" Young Master Han asked. "Eh?" That man was stunned for a good moment before answering. "According to what we know, it was Comrade Thousand Miles Drunk who begun teaching this routine with his deft skills. Not teach but develop. This fighting routine is entirely our friend, Thousand Miles Drunk's creation," young Master Han corrected. Eternal Dominion turned around. "The two most basic forms of this fighting routine were developed by me." Silence. Everything was still. "Ahem." Eternal Dominion coughed once before resuming the lesson. Young Master Han looked entirely unperturbed by this interruption, continuing. "That is to say, Thousand Miles Drunk has merely forgotten to establish any sort of rules, such as everything is copyrighted, and any imitators will be dealt with accordingly. In the end, you guys stole what you're teaching now and began profiting off it. We're kind enough not to pursue you all for your infringement, but with you all coming forward to question this fighting routine's creator regarding his pricing, honestly, I simply can't accept how you are going about doing this," young Master Han said. "Who are you?" "I'm the official distributor of the real deal." Young Master Han smiled as he gave his reply. The other party scoffed. "While there's no doubt that Thousand Miles Drunk developed this, is this sort of thing something so complicated? Is there really a lot of techniques behind this? Isn't it simply a method to fight monsters by getting a read of how it fights and countering it accordingly? What is this talk about copyrights? Have you gamed before, man? How is this fighting style considered authentic when he was the one teaching it, but we're considered the bootleggers for doing the same?" Young Master Han shrugged and then turned to address Gu Fei. "It's your turn." Once he was done, he stepped away. The man began sweating. After being disdainfully regarded by young Master Han as bootleggers, disqualified from earning anything off of this venture, he got a little impulsive and completely forgot that they were in front of the most fearsome slayer in Parallel World. When young Master Han said, "It's your turn," these men already felt that their deaths were imminent. Thus, none of them expected Gu Fei to ignore them. Nodding when he saw that the conversation was over, he merely said, "Leave if there's nothing else." Once these men knew for sure that negotiations had ended in a stalemate, and with how none of them dared to be too forceful with their words against Thousand Miles Drunk, the only thing that they could do was leap right off the rocky outcrop. Young Master Han, on the other hand, was astonished. "Are you kidding me? Those guys just said that there's no technique in your kung fu. How can this be considered as kung fu? It's only useful against a bunch of A.I.'S. There's nothing technical about this," Gu Fei reasoned. "Fuck, I really can't make sense of the way you kung fu practitioners think," young Master Han chided. Gu Fei grimaced. "This is something we've worked hard practicing for over 20 odd years. Yet all we've achieved thus far is enhance everyone's gameplay in this lousy game. How can I summon the energy to get angry about this when something as tragic as this had already happened? It's not tragic. I feel it's pretty good. How many people is that today?" Eternal Dominion suddenly twisted his head back with a look of enthusiasm. "Listen to how woke this man is. And you're still looking around back there. Are you hoping to protect world peace or something?" young Master Han asked. Gu Fei was depressed. Eternal Dominion had trouble with making a living to survive, so he already felt very fortunate being able to use his kung fu to supplement his daily needs. Meanwhile, Gu Fei was discomforted with merely eking out a living through kung fu. He was hoping for it to be able to have an earth-shaking, heaven-shattering usefulness, yet now it was only good for killing monsters and other players. Developing some efficient grinding methods, in a game, Gu Fei, without a shred of doubt, truly considered this travesty to be a real tragedy. It was as the saying went, when the belly is full, the mind wanders. eternal dominion in a state where his daily necessities were his immediate concern, while Gufei, who was hardly troubled by such matters, was seeking to put everything he had learned into practice. Originally, they were both in tragic states, except that they were each facing tragedy in different aspects of their lives. Alas, now that there was a market for Kung Fu in Parallel World, and that it was at least possible to earn a good living from it, Eternal Dominion's tragedy was as good as resolved, while Gufei was still mired deep in tragedy. Those men did not dare to throw down the gauntlet rashly against Thousand Miles Drunk, so they had all beaten a hasty retreat after being scorned, only flashing their middle fingers at the men atop the rocky outcrop once they were a good distance away. "What do we do now?" one of them asked. "Fucking hell. Acting the fool got us struck by lightning. If that's the case, we'll struggle with them till the end." "They won't have a good end, either. I'm prepared to drop my price down to 80 gold coins, you guys can do as you see fit." The de facto leader of the bootleggers declared his stance. "If that's the case, I'll just lower it down to 99 gold coins, someone said. "HMPH. Are you afraid that Gufei will come and cause you trouble?" The leader scoffed. The man did not give an answer. This was precisely what he was worried about. Right now, the one with the lowest price floor for this was Thousand Miles Drunk. Who would dare to offend the number one slayer? "Well, that's what I'm precisely going to do. He may come if he wishes. I've already earned myself a hefty sum, anyway. I'm not about to complain about losing a level." The leader already deadened his resolve. This was mainly because he had been brimming with confidence when he first brought everyone over to persuade Thousand Miles Drunk, but he ended up barely speaking any words with that man, and ended up on the sharp end of that androgynous guy's sarcastic jabs. Unable to stomach this any longer, he was determined to begin a price war with them, a despicable means by which to drag them down to his level since he could not beat them at their own game. "I'll reduce my price, too. Make as much as I can while I'm still able. Honestly, I doubt that we can compete if we match his price. Look at the area they are holding. He's more than capable of taking almost 2,000 players at one go. As for us, I doubt we can even reach 1,000 at once," another said. "Then, I'll drop my price, too. I'm not afraid of shit." Yet another one decided. In the end, only one person remained hesitant after collaboratively talking this through. The others ignored this one person and, after a good discussion, felt that they had to give a more forceful show of strength, so they lowered it down to 50 gold coins to compete with Gufei's gang ruthlessly. Consequences be damned. News of the 50 gold coins lessons began to spread, and a majority of the players could not be bothered with authenticity of the routine. All that mattered to them was how cheap it was. And so the huge mass of players by the 9,527 outcrop began to thin out. Besides those who had already paid, most of the players left. Leaving is good. Leaving is great. Sword Demon and the other two happily climbed up the 9,527 rocky outcrop to rest once they saw that there were hardly any players coming. This was the first time in their lives that they collected money to the point of wanting to vomit. It was truly peculiar feeling they are experiencing. Meanwhile, young Master Han, who had heard of how the bootleggers started lowering their prices to lure in customers, laughed mirthlessly. "That idiotic bunch is truly useless, not even able to see the trap card we've set. Aren't they the ones who are unclear of the situation?" "Master Miles, how goes the development for the White Mill?" "The fighting routine's already been established, but I do think that we have manpower issue," Gufei replied. Chapter 605, Do You Wish to Be a Good Guy? Manpower is an issue. Young Master Han nodded in agreement, before turning his gaze on the others. "Do any of you have any trustworthy friends whom we can get to join us?" These men exchanged glances. It was Sword Demon who finally spoke. "This business venture is quite the money maker, so it's going to be really easy to find people to help out. But the problem is that we're dealing with a lot of money here. Just look at this afternoon alone. Were it not for those guys lowering the price once more, how long do you think we would be busy? Honestly, I'm not interested in spending all my time just making money." "Yeah, making money isn't our main reason for playing this game." The two other players, whose hands were jelly from collecting money, bemoaned this as well. "No way. It's really interesting." Eternal Dominion made his stance known by speaking out against the prevailing sentiment. Can the two kung fu practitioners head to another corner and converse with themselves? Don't come here and speak to us. Young Master Han waved his hand dismissively. War Without Wounds shot young Master Han a hard glare, meaning to tell him not to drag the others into the water with his flippant words. Meanwhile, Royal God Call already happily sought to pull Gu Fei into the conversation. Miles, what are your thoughts on this? I don't have any desire for money. Gu Fei was in an even more enlightened state than the three. The three men merely expressed that they had no wish to spend all their time making money, while Gu Fei immediately came out saying that he had no such desires to begin with. If you don't have any desire for it, why are you so enthusiastic about it? Everyone wondered aloud. Gu Fei let loose a heavy sigh. Where should he begin? After giving it a moment of thought, he said, I can't be bothered to explain it. Do you guys want my sword to do the talking, instead? I feel that what Sword Demon said makes a lot of sense. We're not playing this game to make money. The topic changed too quickly, making it seem as if no one had spoken to Gu Fei. Sword Demon nodded solemnly, waving his hand to Gu Fei at the same time. I'll return your money in a bit. The heavy burden he had been carrying all this while could finally be lifted. Although no one said anything about the money allocation for today's session, since Sword Demon was among the three collecting fees, he had a good idea about their earnings. He believed that no matter how the money was split, as long as he was included in the count, the portion he would receive should be more than enough to clear his debts. Since everyone is so enlightened and doesn't wish to use money to measure their worth, why don't we stop right here? Young Master Han asked. No, don't. Royal God Call and War Without Wounds vehemently disagreed. Gu Fei was completely unconcerned, so he did not make a sound. As for Sword Demon, he knew young Master Han's nature too well. He would be too much of a failure if he became flustered just from hearing this. Eternal Dominion, meanwhile, completely believed that the man was being honest, but he was hardly anxious. Instead, he was thinking far ahead. Oh, you guys don't want to do this? How troublesome. I'll have to search for others to help out. Then, I wonder if Brother Assist is still interested in this. It was obvious from Eternal Dominion's contemplative look that he was thinking about contacting new partners. This time, it was young Master Han's expression that changed ever so slightly, as things would be troublesome if a key source like Eternal Dominion was to slip out of his palms. Eternal Dominion did not see any value in having him as part of the operation. Meanwhile, War Without Wounds and Royal God Call had already stepped closer to Eternal Dominion's side. Brother Eternal, don't listen to the ravings of this madman, War Without Wounds coaxed. That's right. Royal God Call nodded. During such crucial moments, both men even dared to do something as dangerous as deride young Master Han. Look, it's not that we're unwilling to do it, but you can tell what the crux of the matter is. The main reason we play this game is to relax and enjoy ourselves online after a hard day's work. We're only looking to earn a little extra here in Parallel World for us to spend. Isn't it too much for us to work so hard on it like it's an actual job even in game? Yeah. Royal God Call agreed. Too shameless. Even someone as considerate as Sword Demon could not stand the two any longer and used both his middle fingers to express his disdain for the two. These two who spent all their time submerged in the game actually dared to say that they had a hard time working the whole day. Especially Royal God Call. He was not even sure if the boy was of age to work yet. In any case, Eternal Dominion understood that they meant. It was evident that they placed enjoyment as their priority in Parallel World. Money was merely a supplement to their enjoyment. Getting them to treat this business as a part-time job was possible, but for them to develop this venture from the ground up like this was simply too much. They had expressed their misgivings to the idea given how it would most likely occupy a lot of their time once things got busy if they were not too careful with their time management. In the end, the most reliable person was still Sword Demon, who considered the issue thoughtfully before saying, if you truly want to form a steady, long-term partnership for this venture, I feel that your best bet is a workshop. Workshop? Young Master Han chuckled. That is indeed the best choice. Unfortunately, if you cooperate with a workshop, they will only require Miles and Eternal Dominion, What can you miscellaneous men do? Collect fees, run errands, deliver mails? Whatever you guys can do, there are plenty of workshop members that can replace you. Why should they split any part of their profits to you guys? We can always negotiate it right from the start. Royal Godcall suggested. Okay, then that will require Miles and Eternal Dominion to go make contact. The general idea is for these two men to hire the workshop for all the menial labor, and everyone will share the profits together, but there's a catch. It's where you useless bums will be reared for nothing. Motherfucker. Do you guys even have any semblance of pride? Young Master Han reprimanded. Sword Demon, what sort of lousy suggestion did you give? Royal Godcall and War Without Wounds were quick to turn sides. Furthermore, after hearing young Master Han describe this in detail, Sword Demon could feel just how unbearable his suggestion was. He was a good to honest Apex expert, after all. There was really no way he could stand becoming a freeloader that depended on his relations. It's impossible to work with a workshop, anyway. Besides the issue of face that I previously detailed, workshops have scale, resources, and organization. They are a disciplined operation. Working with them means surrendering your ability to make decisions to their hands. Although Miles and Eternal Dominion possess the critical skill for this business venture, intentionally burning bridges after making the crossing is one such method people utilize during the early stages of businesses that are highly reliant on skilled talents. Thus, working together with workshops isn't exactly a good idea. In the end, it was still young Master Han who had given a more severe analysis of the matter. So what do you think is the best recourse? Royal Godcall asked. That's easy, set up our own workshop, young Master Han replied. Fuck. The three men all expressed their contempt at this answer. A workshop was totally nothing about gaming anymore but a company, of which the sole purpose was to earn money in games, instead, and this was something Sword Demon and the others would definitely not do. Please, can all of your brains put in a little more work? If we set up a workshop, we'll be the boss. Tell me, which workshop has their boss farming gold out there? Young Master Han asked. Yes, there are. Take Command Workshop, can you shut up? Young Master Han glared at Royal Godcall for pulling out a contrarian example. Thus, Royal Godcall kept his mouth shut. Honestly, the example he had raised was a unique outlier. There was no end of strangeness in the world, so there was no way to say for sure that there was no boss out there who would have the pastime of being the chauffeur or bodyguard, but it was not inaccurate to assert that the vast majority of bosses out there would definitely not be found doing the most menial labor in their companies. Thus, young Master Han continued to elaborate on his plan. Pull out all your names and set up a workshop. You should still have some measure of star power within the MMO community, right? So take in a few professional gamers, specifically to work on this business. Oh, God. I can't help but commend myself for this amazing idea of mine. Hey, hey, hey. Gufei called the four men who had long since forgotten about his and Eternal Dominion's presence. The four mercenaries turned to look, only to hear him casually say, there's no need for things to get so complicated. Eternal Dominion and I have discussed the matter on our end, and we'll just randomly find a workshop to cooperate on this. War Without Wounds and Royal Godcall screeched. They were already rushing right to Gufei to condemn him for his lack of loyalty. Sword Demon was still maintaining his composure, as he did not believe that Gufei would be so disloyal and act so unbrotherly. Young Master Han was similarly holding back his words. He too was aware that Gufei would not act in such a manner, but for the man to blurt this out while he was commending his idea moments ago, his words acted like a splash of cold water whether Gufei was being serious or otherwise. Alright, let's all get serious. Ahem. Gufei was solemn as he continued. I do think that this workshop idea is good. Eternal Dominion, what do you think? Yes, very good. Eternal Dominion nodded. Those students you've got can come and lend us a hand by then. Gufei said. Those guys? They already graduated after the orientation training. They got their certification last New Year and went off to find relevant jobs, Eternal Dominion said. Is that so? Your school will graduate students just like that? Of course, what about you? Mine is an official national public school, so their graduation is in the summer, Gufei answered. Doesn't that make you a right and proper teacher? Enjoying the benefits of being a civil servant, are you? It's not bad. You can normally go head a class and do stuff like home tutoring and the sorts. That's very profitable. Bro, I'm teaching phys ed, Gufei reminded. Oh, I forgot. Then, are there any kung fu admirers out there that got you to teach a little? Eternal Dominion was still inquiring. Nope, absolutely nothing. This was a point of disappointment for Gufei. Any mention of kung fu in school was essentially a tragedy. How unfortunate. If there's any sort of tutoring in this avenue, do introduce me as well, Eternal Dominion requested. Of course. You know I'm not short on that bit of money, so I'll be sure to recommend you if such an opportunity comes up, Gufei concurred. Thanks. Eternal Dominion expressed his gratitude. Are you two done with your small talk? The four men were visibly annoyed by their conversation. Ahem. That workshop isn't a bad idea. Any thoughts, Eternal Dominion? Gufei asked again. Yes, it's great. Actually, don't your students play Parallel World? We can use them to work for us and help them earn a little pocket money. Eternal Dominion suggested. My students aren't of age yet. Gufei sweated. Earning a bit of allowance isn't bad, too. Eternal Dominion persuaded. No way. Students ought to prioritize studying. What sort of future are they gonna have if they keep playing games? Gufei reasoned. That's true. Take some of my students for example. Are you two done yet? The four men angrily bellowed in unison. Alright. We'll take charge with setting up this workshop. You two instructors, just remember to show up to take these classes when the time comes. Young Master Han said. The players who join workshops are those professionals seeking to earn money through gaming, right? Gufei asked. Sometimes, they can't even be considered as players. They treat it like a job, making it no different from any other line of work out there, Sword Demon said. Will Southern Lone Blade and the others count? Gufei suddenly asked. They were all stunned, as young Master Han sardonically quipped. Oh, is the great hero thinking of hanging a medicine gourd one? I don't think it's an easy life for them to be looting other players' equipment to earn money, Gufei commented. You're the reason things aren't easy for them. The crowd silently thought this. I don't really mind it if they are willing to join us. Those guys are certainly of caliber, and it just so perfectly covers the 6 main job classes. They'd make for excellent demonstration instructors, young Master Han agreed. Hey, they are the enemy. Aren't you afraid of them pulling dirty tricks when the time comes? Royal Godcall exclaimed in shock. Under the very scrutiny of yours truly, is there anyone that can pull anything without me knowing? Young Master Han retorted. Royal Godcall deflated, saying despondently, the point is, how can we trust them? Honestly, gaining their trust now is the far more difficult matter, young Master Han said. I'll go look for them. Gufei nodded. Please do not force them. Royal Godcall yelled after him. A child would always draw a clear distinction between love and hate. Got it. Gufei answered, leaping off the outcrop and making his way to Beishi City even as he sent a message over to Southern Lone Blade. Where are you? As expected, he got no reply to his message for quite some time. Thus, Gufei sent another message. I have a very lucrative business venture, are you interested? Southern Lone Blade was having very mixed feelings when he received Gufei's message. This was because it had been days since he last saw or received a message from Gufei. For something as surprising as this to pop up, it only made matters far more complex than usual. Nevertheless, Southern Lone Blade was a man who was gaming to earn money, so there was no way he could bear to ignore such a message. Since exchanging messages was not about to result in death, the man decided to respond. What business venture? Oh, don't you know about the huge venture I'm recently involved with? Gufei was somewhat surprised. He thought that Southern Lone Blade would quickly think of the super popular instructing occurring at the wilderness camp when he mentioned about doing business. Southern Lone Blade did not seem to be the sort that would not be in the loop of such news. After all, who would have thought that Southern Lone Blade would really answer no, though? Wilderness camp, campfire patroller, efficient monster grinding routines. Gufei consecutively sent him these 3 key phrases. Southern Lone Blade replied with 4 words of his. What do you mean? Lately, what have you been busy with? Gufei asked. The fact that Southern Lone Blade had no idea of such a huge thing happening, Gufei suspected that the man was no longer in Beishi City. He did not get any reply for a long time, and just as Gufei was about to send another message, Southern Lone Blade replied, What are you seeking me for? Huh? Do you know what the 3 phrases I've sent your way mean? Of course, I do. Southern Lone Blade had in fact inquired about this in that last minute, and since he was not a noob, he could already estimate just how huge the profits would be without needing to think a lot. We're about to set up a workshop to do this business, and we need helpers, Goofy said. So why do you look for me? This was the question Southern Lone Blade inevitably had to ask. If this were a movie, we would be like, Southern Lone Blade, I want to be a good guy, why can't you give me a chance? Goofy, I'll give you the chance. Goofy replied thusly. Goofy? Whoops, sorry. That's my real name. Just replace it accordingly. Goofy figuratively wiped sweat off his forehead. His IGN, 1,000 miles drunk, was not ingrained into his identity much, so while he would answer when someone called him that, in his internal monologue, he still called himself Goofy. This is a great opportunity. If I were in your shoes, I'd surely risk my life and give it a shot. Goofy added. Why would I be risking my life? Southern Lone Blade asked. Because there's a very simple test to find out whether I'm telling the truth or not. All you gotta do is step right up to me. If I'm lying, you'll die on the spot. If I'm telling the truth, you'll have your life intact. Goofy replied. Southern Lone Blade broke out in a cold sweat. You're the one who suggested this. If you still have other schemes, you won't just kill me once you get me on the hook. Aside from being slain by me, what other sort of tragedy can you suffer in my hands? Goofy asked. Southern Lone Blade contemplated further. Our cooperation means all my fellow teammates will be brought on board, too, right? Of course, Goofy guaranteed. So, if you choose not to kill me when we meet, can't you get rid of us all at one go once I gather everyone else for you? Southern Lone Blade asked. Goofy was irked. Say, can't you be a little bit more optimistic about this, or have you done too much evil already? Southern Lone Blade began to ruminate over this offer once more. Goofy sighed. Sure enough, it's exactly as what young Master said. Getting Southern Lone Blade to trust us is far more difficult than us trusting Southern Lone Blade's gang. Fine, I'll meet you just once. Southern Lone Blade finally bit the bullet and made his decision. Where are you? Goofy heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that his persuasion had seen initial results as Southern Lone Blade had been slightly swayed by it. Auction house, Southern Lone Blade answered. Hey, no way, right? Goofy was astonished. If that man is at the auction house. He glanced at the time and date. Today was the last day that Vast Lushness's magic staff could be retrieved from the distribution NPC. And there was in fact only 40 minutes left. Southern Lone Blade did not say a word because Goofy's guess was spot on. They were still camping at the Utopian magic staff. Goofy ran all the way back to the city. By the time he arrived at the auction house, there was only 8 minutes left on the clock. Where are you? Goofy messaged. 7 players appeared from nearby corners of the streets. They were the 7 members of Southern Lone Blade's posse, and all these men moved to surround Goofy. An ambush? Goofy did not think that was the case, for it would be more effective for them to begin their assault right away if this was truly an ambush. It would be too unprofessional of them to step out and confront him together so leisurely. Since you're the one suggesting this test, we don't mind going the full mile for it. All 7 of us are present here. Better make it quick if you're gonna slay us all. Southern Lone Blade said. Goofy gazed at the 7 men, not making a move. All he did was utter a single sentence. You guys have thinned. Almost instantly, 4 out of the 7 men choked back tears. Goofy addressed the unshaven and haggard-looking Southern Lone Blade. Have you guys been waiting for the Utopian magic staff all this while? Southern Lone Blade nodded. And the buyer hasn't appeared even once? Goofy was very surprised by this fact. Southern Lone Blade nodded yet again. Forget about it. There's much more money for you guys to be made, Goofy said. Having been chatting all this while, they were more or less convinced about Goofy's sincerity in his offer, but they still had one final shred of obstinacy right now. We're not gonna make a move, but we must find out just who the buyer is. The 7 men gritted their teeth. That's right. Just who is the buyer? Even Goofy found this affair to be a little strange. He glanced at the time again. There's still 5 minutes left. Shall we go in? Flame-cinched Clothes suggested. They were still outside the auction house, with only Glue standing somewhere nearby to keep watch from afar. Let's go. Gu Fei waved his hand and walked in first. The 7 men followed behind, thinking that this entire sequence seemed like a dream. Never did they imagine that there would be a day when they would be neatly following right behind 1,000 Miles Drunk. In the main hall of the auction house, players were queuing in an orderly fashion by the retrieval point to pick up either their money or goods. Gu Fei took another look at the time. 4 minutes. The eyes of Southern Lone Blade and his men were almost bloodshot at this point. They stared rigidly at everybody in the queue, especially the priests. Just who would actually be so callous and inconsiderate to leave things in suspense to such a degree? Footnotes. Ch 605 Footnote 1 Chinese parable about a mystical old medical practitioner who visited and hung his medicine gourd, from which every pill he pulled out cured the illness of every patient who visited him. This term is often used to refer to any aspiring Chinese physician, while also referring to any person who's seeking to save someone else from pain/misery/illness. Chapter 606. Everything is not over yet. These 4 minutes passed by in a blink of an eye. Southern Lone Blade and the others did not know the exact time, so they were still staring at the people queuing in front of them. Meanwhile, Gu Fei checked the time and more or less confirmed that this whole auction transaction had come to a close. If Southern Lone Blade had not made any mistake while they were keeping watch over it, could the utopian magic staff have really been bought off but not retrieved? Gu Fei wondered as he turned to regard the 7 men. Noticing his expression, they began to express their astonishment. Has it ended? Southern Lone Blade asked. Gu Fei nodded. How could that be? 6 out of the 7 men croaked. Gu Fei could not make sense of things, either, so all he could do was shrug. The 7 exchanged glances. During this period, they had devoted a majority of their time to this magic staff, but the conclusion they had gotten was truly too miserable. It was like they had played mahjong for an entire afternoon. The winners would be euphoric, and the losers would become dispirited, even going as far as to resolve to get revenge next time. However, for someone who had not really won or lost, the feeling they got was akin to not existing at all, and it would most likely feel as if everything had been for naught. During our entire lookout here, we've been interrupted several times. Southern Lone Blade reflected. None of them believed that there would be a player out there would purchase the utopian magic staff and not retrieve it, so Southern Lone Blade was convinced that they must have slipped up on their watch this whole period. Perhaps, there's a method for that buyer to retrieve the item from right under our noses? Glue guessed. Southern Lone Blade shook his head in a daze, for he simply could not come to a decision. Having expended so much effort on this for so long yet not even having anything to show at the end of it, such a conclusion could potentially be fatal to everyone involved. Even though Gu Fei could not completely approve of their actions, he was rather sympathetic when he saw how dejected each of them looked. He realized that this bunch of men was just like Size Ocean. While what they were doing was not clean, at the very least, the level of perseverance and earnestness they showed was worth affirming. You guys shouldn't be so bothered by this matter anymore. We're gonna set up a workshop, so join us. There won't be any need for you guys to keep committing crimes anymore. This time, Gu Fei officially extended the invitation to the men, sounding really sincere as he did so. Thanks. Southern Lone Blade expressed his gratitude for his team. Still, we've got some things to settle. You guys still want to carry on? Gu Fei was a little dissatisfied when he heard this. Having taken the client's money but unable to accomplish anything, we gotta at least account for it, Southern Lone Blade explained. Silver Moon's the guy who hired you guys for this assignment, right? He asked. This was something they had already deduced. Yup. Southern Lone Blade was no longer denying this now that things had reached this point. What are you gonna do? Gu Fei asked. According to the conditions we've set, failure to accomplish the assignment means we gotta return double the deposit. Southern Lone Blade sighed. Why even care about that unscrupulous guy? Just keep that money as pocket money. Gu Fei said. Southern Lone Blade's men looked at Gu Fei in surprise, taken aback that this man would turn out to be so unprincipled. Actually, this was a result of both parties having different standpoints and thoughts about this issue. The 7 were viewing this matter as a business deal, wherein integrity was a huge factor. After all, how could a man without integrity get clients to give a deposit when there were no binding conditions to safeguard their money? Even though it was all agreed that Silver Moon was a scumbag of the worst sort, as well as a detestable human being that they had even laid out an ambush for him to vent their frustrations that one time. Southern Lone Blade's gang still had such a deep-rooted belief of paying back the deposit in double upon failing an assignment and would not make an exception even for someone like Silver Moon. In a way, this was them giving consideration to the overall situation. Ahem, that's not a good thing. Even though it was Gufei who had offered such a suggestion, the 7 men were a little uncomfortable with it. Weren't you guys preparing to ambush him a few days ago? What's up with that? Gufei had been pondering on this and could still not make sense of it even now. Fortunately, he finally had the chance to ask this now that their two parties were set to build a closer relationship. Ahem, that's nothing. Southern Lone Blade and the others all showed an awkward look. Their attempt to ambush Silver Moon was a rage-induced decision they had rashly made due to their inability to deal with Gufei, and these men found it a little embarrassing to mention it. Did you succeed? Gufei asked. Nope. We kept a lookout the entire day and didn't discover where that man was, Glue answered. What a waste. Gufei sighed with regret before perking up. You guys are gonna pay him back the money now, right? Do you intend to meet him in person? Normally, when we can't complete our assignment, we ask the client to meet us so that we can offer an apology, as well as give the money we owe, in person, Southern Lone Blade said. Yes. Just like what you did with Slurries. Gufei nodded. The 7 men lowered their head in embarrassment, wondering if Gufei had intentionally mentioned that to further humiliate them. However, seeing that his expression remained unchanged, like he was speaking in passing without any ill intentions, the 7 reckoned that it was simply their guilt at work, so they soon calmed down. From what I've gathered from your words, I take it that you guys aren't planning to do the same with Silver Moon? Gufei asked. That's right. We can't be bothered to meet that guy, so my plan is to send a mail and enclose the money within as we call it quits, affirmed Southern Lone Blade. Why not use this chance to invite him over and slay him after? Gufei asked. None of the 7 men particularly minded this, especially Flame-Singed Clothes, who was very taken by the idea. Having been slain by Gufei a few times, he wished to experience what it felt to work side by side and slay someone else together for a change. Okay, Glue will contact Silver Moon. Since I no longer have him in my friends list, that guy might get suspicious if I take the initiative to invite him again. Southern Lone Blade was still as thorough as ever. Gufei sighed. Southern Lone Blade's gaming caliber is top-notch, and he's quite adept at schemes and plots, too. He's truly a man of talent. Bro, we failed to get the Utopian magic staff. Sorry about that. When are you free to meet us? We want to give the double deposit we owe you. Glue sent this message over to the man, as if everything was normal. In that case, forget about meeting up and just mail it to me directly. Forget about the double deposit as well. Considering our relationship, if it's too inconvenient for you guys, just consider the deposit as my prepayment. I'm sure we would still have plenty of opportunities to work together in the future. Haha. Silver Moon laughed the matter off, acting entirely consistent with the slick and sly nature he was known for. Even though this was a conclusion he had keenly hoped for from the start, he did not ruthlessly take that 4,000 gold coin recompense in the end, as this was not what he needed at this time. This reply left Glue feeling greatly astonished, and he quickly relayed this message to Southern Lone Blade and the others. That guy. Southern Lone Blade sucked in a sharp cold breath. Silver Moon was scum, and he was the terrifying sort. At the very least, with how little he regarded these thousands of gold coins, it only showed how high the man had set his sights on. Presently, this was his attempt at currying favor with Southern Lone Blade's gang to repair and strengthen the relationship between the two parties. His usage of the term prepayment was even cleverer. To put it more crudely, this was him insinuating just how tightly the two parties were bound together. If this was just Silver Moon foregoing the double deposit he was owed, Southern Lone Blade and his men would see it as a favor from the man this once, but because this was 2,000 gold coins that was being gifted, it would, instead, leave Southern Lone Blade's team being in debt to Silver Moon. What made this even more shameless was that half-joking tone he had when talking about this prepayment. The choice of whether this sum was written off or otherwise was essentially placed entirely in Silver Moon's hands. At the end of the day, Silver Moon did not waste a single coin at all but, instead, left Southern Lone Blade's gang heavily indebted to him. Truly, that man was the trashiest scumbag possible. Silvermoon's move here would surely have succeeded if this was just like any other time. Unfortunately, his notoriety for his scummy ways was well known by now. Besides, Southern Lone Blade was not exactly someone who could be easily dealt with in such manner. And evidence of this was when the man said to Glue angrily, "Immediately send that scum the money we owe, and make sure it's the double cost. I really don't intend to have any further dealings with that man." At the same time, he turned to face Gufei. Silvermoon is sure to be on guard given his current situation, so I doubt that he's going to agree to meet us in person. Gufei nodded. "You're right. We'll talk about this at a later period, then." "So, what now?" Southern Lone Blade asked. "Do you guys have anything else left to settle?" Gufei asked. "Nope. Everything will be settled once we pass by a mailbox and dump the money into a letter for Silvermoon whenever we please," Southern Lone Blade replied. Using words like pass by, dump, and whenever we please was more evidence of how much the man despised Silvermoon. "In that case, follow me to the wilderness camp so we can all go over everything in its entirety," Gufei suggested. "Okay." Southern Lone Blade nodded, and the 7 men followed him out of the auction house and the city. These men did not completely trust Gufei at this time, and several of them privately messaged Southern Lone Blade, wondering if Gufei had ulterior motives. Southern Lone Blade could not be bothered to put too much thought into this right now. Having expended plenty of time and effort, he was now looking forward to some relaxation time, so he casually handled these worries. Still, as he looked at Gufei leading the way, he could not help but feel a little perturbed as well. Meanwhile, Gufei had already informed young Masters Elite of his success in convincing Southern Lone Blade's team to join them. "That took some skill," young Master Han commented offhandedly. Royal God Call and War Without Wounds were still a little unhappy about it. The former was acting like a child with a difficult temper, while the latter was holding a grudge over Southern Lone Blade originally ranking above him on the warrior leaderboard. So even though that man was no longer ahead of him, War Without Wounds still held certain reservations to the man. Sword Demon had no comments about this, but it was actually Brother Assist who was really pleased with this outcome. He was originally friends with Southern Lone Blade, but things had gotten awkward between them due to those events transpiring. Brother Assist could not be any happier, or more supportive, now that they had the possibility of burying the hatchet and return to how it was before. The bustling sight that greeted Southern Lone Blade and his men when they arrived at the wilderness camp left them stupefied. They had nearly become the resident shut-ins of the auction house as they staked the place out. It even reached the point where they were clueless about this huge happenstance outside Beishi City. They walked a good length, still dumbfounded, and took in the situation all around them. Southern Lone Blade eventually recovered and wrinkled his brows. "The state of affairs here seems to be pretty complicated, huh?" "That's right. Look, the area over the 9,527 outcrop is our turf, and the others you see around are those who started their own business after grasping our teaching. Furthermore, the price that they're offering it is significantly lower than ours. We're completely out of customers when I left earlier, but it seems that things have taken a turn for the better now." Gufei was looking over at the outcrop, and he could see that quite a good number of players were gathered under it. "That's not what I'm referring to," Southern Lone Blade shook his head. "Look, the wilderness camp has essentially reached a state of overpopulation, and there's definitely more players than monsters at this point. The way I see it, quite a lot of players are still unfamiliar with the monster grinding routine you guys have created, and there's a good portion of players who are still learning it at the moment. Right now, it can be said that one monster is shared among hundreds, so the equilibrium could still be maintained, though barely. But as more and more players come forth to learn, and more players grasp it, that would be when the efficiency of your efficient grinding routine would truly shine. Can you imagine just what sort of scene we will be confronted with?" "A stampede for monsters?" Gufei offered. "That's right, and it will be a very intense stampede for monsters to boot," Southern Lone Blade remarked. "Let me give you an example. Consider the wilderness camp as a newly opened double EXP1 grinding map. Logically speaking, players from all over the world will be surging here to fight over it." "That does sound really troublesome," Gufei echoed. "If such a development were to really occur, the wilderness camp would transform into the ultimate park wonderland well beyond even that of Y City. If you don't wish to see such a situation unfold, we'll have to control methodically the rate at which we develop fighting routines for new monsters. If we just continuously develop more of these double or even triple EXP grinding maps, releasing all at one go, there's no way that we can guarantee our profits. But it won't be good either if we push out a new fighting routine statically, every 3 or so days. Right now, what we should take note of is the number of players present in the grinding maps. That's the crucial indicator. When Goofy heard this, he realized that it was very similar to the plan young Master Han had proposed in the beginning, so he asked unhesitatingly, "What do you think should be the ideal number of players, then?" I can't tell you that at the moment. I'll have to do some calculations and observe further," Southern Lone Blade admitted. Looks like there's still a little gap between them, Goofy thought to himself. Young Master Han had immediately given them the number of 5 times past the point of saturation, albeit he himself had no idea just how much this 5 times would really be. In the time that they were talking, they had already arrived at the 9,527 outcrop, and the hearts of Southern Lone Blade and his team were palpitating at a peak crescendo right now. If Goofy and the others had any scheme, this should be when they sprang it on them. Moreover, the current instructor conducting class atop the 9,527 outcrop was not Eternal Dominion but Brother Assist. Instead, he was teaching the no agility, long weapon fighting routine, and while he was nowhere as dexterous as Goofy or Eternal Dominion, he was still fairly skilled. Those bootleg instructors were essentially at the same standards as him, with some not even at his level. Brother Assist flashed a friendly smile to welcome Southern Lone Blade and the others when he saw them. Young Master Han and the others did not exactly react to their presence, but that was not them showing any hatred. They were a bunch of experts that were cocky in the first place. This was just like how Royal God Call had not initially thought much of Goofy during their first meeting, while the others only treated Goofy as a person because he had come highly recommended by Sword Demon. Considering how Southern Lone Blade's team were as players that had lost to them, which of these experts would care to greet them courteously? This was not a place that accepted everyone as equals. Instead, it was Eternal Dominion who immediately jumped off the rocky outcrop. When Southern Lone Blade and the others saw that Eternal Dominion was present, their hearts lurched. Eternal Dominion took 2 steps forward and asked, "Does that assignment to kill Southern Lone Blade still count?" The 7 men immediately sought to turn tail and sprint off when they heard this, but they heard Goofy snappily reply, "Forget that, it's not gonna count." The 7 had only managed to turn around and were just about to run away, but hearing Goofy's reply, they turned around amid their alarm, only to see Eternal Dominion's glum countenance. "But the employer hasn't said a word." "Why would it not count just because you said that it won't?" Southern Lone Blade and his men were frightened even as they asked, "Who's the employer?" Eternal Dominion had strong professional ethics, so he did not say a word. Goofy was not in the profession, so he was not bound by the same ethics, and he immediately uttered the name. "Svelte Dancer." "Oh." Southern Lone Blade's reaction showed his understanding. At the end of the day, he did stomp on her chest and caused her to lose a level. "Hey, no matter how you explain it to that lady, this will be a very thorny issue." Goofy scratched his head. "If I apologize to her and let her kill me once, will that resolve everything?" Southern Lone Blade asked. Goofy was surprised. "You're willing to do that? It's no big deal." Southern Lone Blade did not mind. Sword Demon and Southern Lone Blade were experts, but there was a distinct difference between the two. Things like an expert's dignity could not be found in Southern Lone Blade, or to be precise, it was not that it did not exist but that Southern Lone Blade had never considered himself as an expert. The things he valued were not those, and he was only searching for the best method to earn money. Larceny required levels, equipment, and in-game skills, which was why he had strived to become one of the 5 unyielding experts in this game. It was all in order to possess both good equipment and skills. Since the job he was picking up now did not require such things, he was not particularly too worried about losing a level. "With that attitude of yours, perhaps she'll instead lose interest in you." Goofy thought about what he knew of Svelte Dancer. If Southern Lone Blade was the sort not to put up a fight, There was a high chance that she would be bored of it and not act. "You're not intentionally faking this, are you?" Gu Fei suddenly asked. He was evidently aware that Southern Lone Blade was a fairly scheming individual. "Seems that you're not too much of an optimist yourself." Southern Lone Blade sweated. "Fine, I'll call her over and let you two settle it yourselves," Gu Fei said. "Okay." Southern Lone Blade nodded. "Did Svelte Dancer mention anything about dealing with us?" the other six asked. "I'm not too sure," Gu Fei answered. "Then, we'll wait for her as well." The six men stood beside Southern Lone Blade, looking like a band of brothers, extremely reminiscent of the Calabash brothers. "Svelte," Gu Fei called out, "are you still intent on slaying Southern Lone Blade?" "No shit." "Then, come over quickly," Gu Fei said. "Wilderness Camp, 9527 Outcrop." "You caught him?" "What a bro." Svelte Dancer was over the moon. Not really. "We're looking to work with them for something, so we want to settle this matter between you two." Gu Fei was being very forthcoming with her. "Fuck me. You betrayed your very nature, you've been corrupted." Svelte Dancer was yelling. "Just come fast." Gu Fei had no wish to elaborate further. Indubitably, Svelte Dancer was the fastest player in Parallel World. Not long after Gu Fei had sent that message, the fiery red figure of hers already appeared in everyone's area of vision. Young Master Han lifted his spyglass for a look and said, "She's here." The eyes of Southern Lone Blade's teammates all shifted to the item young Master Han was holding, trembling as they asked, "What's that in your hands?" Young Master Han flashed them a warm smile. "A spyglass." With that, he specifically regarded Glue. "It's even clearer than Eagle Eye." Someone among the seven men vomited blood. This was why they felt that their every action was being watched without them knowing it. This was why they had successfully been followed despite there clearly not being anyone on their tail. Plenty of the questions floating in their minds were finally answered, and the answer to everything was the spyglass he was holding. Another of the seven could no longer hold himself back and vomited blood as well. "There's such a thing in this game? Where did you get it?" "I borrowed it from someone." That same warm smile was maintained, and those that were vomiting blood continued. Svelte Dancer was right before them in the blink of an eye. The seven men hurriedly collected themselves from the dejection that they shared. They were prepared to make a stand and die for it. Otherwise, they would look far too ugly in the stat they were in. In the end, Svelte Dancer did not glance once at these people when she came over and was poking Gu Fei's nose. Instead, "Why do you want to work with them? What sort of activity is it? Is it something fun? Why didn't you inform this madam first?" Chapter 607, An Unfair Match. Gu Fei took 2 steps back, rubbed his nose, and grimaced. "It's not fun. You're not gonna be interested." "How do you know?" "What is it?" Svelte Dancer was still acting hostile. "Making money," Gu Fei answered. "Ugh!" Svelte Dancer was stunned. Sure enough, what Gu Fei had just said was something she had the least interest in. While it was a fact that professional gamers and workshops could earn quite a bit of money from gaming, it was not an incredible way of earning money. It would be far too fantastical if someone could surpass Bill Gates' level of rich by farming gold or selling equipment through the game. After all, the game itself was just another means for people to make money, and it was definitely not a technology that would help people achieve prosperity together fast. It might be too much of a tragedy if the MMO players themselves could earn money faster playing the game than the game developers for operating this game. Thus, for someone like Svelte Dancer who had thousands of gold coins to her name in the game, all her money would be spent entirely for entertainment purposes, which meant she must surely have a more effective way of earning money in real life to help balance out her expenditure here. As such, there was no need for her to waste time in the game earning money. Even Sword Demon and the others did not want to waste too much time earning money, so someone like Svelte Dancer, who had no lack of it, would of course have no need to do this as well. When the crowd of men saw that Svelte Dancer was suddenly silent, all of them could not help but feel envious. To not worry about money, that was a life plenty of people could only dream about. As everyone fantasized about this, they suddenly saw Svelte Dancer turn around grandly and glared at Southern Lone Blade with rage-filled eyes. "Time to die, you cur." Southern Lone Blade puffed his chest out forward as he deftly unequipped his gear. In the eyes of gamers, right now, Southern Lone Blade was in a state of stark nakedness. "What's the meaning of this?" Svelte Dancer was immediately left dumbfounded. That dagger of hers, which was lunging toward the man, stopped mid-flight when she turned to face Gufei for an explanation. All Gufei could do was laugh bitterly. He said that he's gonna let you kill him once as a sign of his sincere apology. What sort of sincerity is he showing if he's gonna be naked? Svelte Dancer was incensed. Southern Lone Blade hurriedly explained, I'm only thinking of making it quicker for you to kill me off. This was not the first time Sword Demon and the others had witnessed Southern Lone Blade do such a full unequip in the face of death, so Royal God Call immediately blew the whistle of this. Aren't you doing this in fear of dropping your equipment upon death? In the end, Southern Lone Blade smiled. I would be afraid under normal circumstances, but today's special. Those present are all acquaintances, so there's really no need to worry about losing any of my equipment in front of everyone. Everybody realized the truth in his words. It was more or less settled that Southern Lone Blade and his men would be working with young Master's elite, so even if he really did drop a piece of equipment upon death here, whoever picked it up would be sure to return it to him. Otherwise, it would just be awkward for them to do anything together in the future. So I really just wish to help you kill me quicker. Southern Lone Blade said to Svelte Dancer. Fine. Svelte Dancer nodded. You wanna die once without resisting, huh? I shall grant your wish, then. You're gonna retaliate the next time I kill you, right? Southern Lone Blade was surprised. Why will there be a next time? Gufei, however, was already chuckling bitterly at the side. He had thought too simply of Svelte Dancer, believing that Southern Lone Blade's stance here would cause the lady to lose her interest in her opponent. He had not expected that, not only would she still do the deed, she would not even bother counting this one time and would simply find another opportunity to try for his life again. It was not just Southern Lone Blade, Van Glue, Flame Singed Clothes, and his other mates were all questioning her. That's right. Why will there be another time? Big South only slew you just once. That woman scowled. It's none of your business. Shut up. The 6 men were in tears. Why must all experts have the habit of being so supercilious? Are we really so nondescript? The 6 were still prepared to stand up for Southern Lone Blade, but none of them knew if they should be laughing or crying when they learned that Svelte Dancer do not hold even the slightest regard for any of them. It was at this time when Southern Lone Blade realized what Svelte Dancer meant. She would definitely get her kill, and she would not care a hoot about his cowardly surrender. Such a death would not count, and she would just come for him again. Southern Lone Blade sighed. I am earnestly extending my apology here. However, Svelte Dancer callously expressed her disdain. This is a game. Killing each other is all part of it. Why apologize for killing someone, anyway? Southern Lone Blade was at a loss himself. He turned to look at Gufei, but the man turned his head to avoid his gaze. In the end, Southern Lone Blade's message was just as quick as that look of his. What now? Do what you want, Gufei replied. So do I don my equipment and fight with her? Southern Lone Blade asked. That's up to you. What if she gets killed by me? Then, what? Southern Lone Blade asked. Why don't you ask her that yourself? Gufei responded. Thus, Southern Lone Blade really posed this question to Svelte Dancer. Okay, I'll seriously have a park match with you, but what if you're no match for me again? Then, what? Svelte Dancer found that word again extremely grating, angrily answering, then, that means you've got the skill, I'll come looking for you again. When the crowd heard this, they immediately thought Southern Lone Blade would surely go easy on the lady, only for Svelte Dancer to mention in advance. HMPH. Don't let me find out that you're going easy on me, or else there will be no end to this business between us. Everyone began to pity Southern Lone Blade even as they all shared the same thought. Women sure are difficult to handle. Southern Lone Blade was helpless, but he already had all his gear equipped once more. No one had any idea just what plan he had in mind. The team of 7 had collectively lost plenty of their levels to Gufei due to the assignment they had picked up, but Southern Lone Blade's level was still intact. At the moment, he was still at level 40 as he assumed his mysterious weapon configuration of a sword in his right hand and a shield in his left hand. With his shield propped forward and his sword hidden behind, this was the usual technique he used when winking, showing absolutely no signs of holding back. Hey, don't you two fight here. My lesson is still ongoing. What had been happening here clashed with the lesson, upsetting Brother Assist, who was still in the middle of instructing the students below, quite a bit. Svelte Dancer also felt that fighting in the midst of all these people would make it hard for her to go all out, so she waved her hand. Over there. Everyone followed to watch the show, with some of the students attending Brother Assist's lesson moving along to take a look as well. In the end, Brother Assist had to bark crossly. There are no supplementary lessons for anyone who leaves. That stopped these people from walking away. They all paid good money for this chance to learn the fighting routine, so these people could only curb their curiosity and continue with their lesson. Meanwhile, Goofy's lot circled to the back of the 9527 outcrop where nobody could have a view of Brother Assist, so there was naturally no other players about. The circle of men stood firmly, leaving just Svelte Dancer and Southern Lone Blade in the center. Southern Lone Blade was still maintaining that same posture, while Svelte Dancer was standing a little more casually. She flicked her wrist to the people around. Stand a bit further. Don't affect my movement. The crowd quickly stood further away, even as Southern Lone Blade stood within the circle and quietly asked, "Can we begin?" "Come on, then." In the moment when Svelte Dancer said this, she had already dashed forward herself. She was never the sort to wait for her enemy to attack first and retaliating accordingly, so she utilized her fleet-foot adapted attack style in this assault at once. The speed she possessed after activating her fleet-foot was all the more indomitable, and with how the two were not far apart from each other, it was as if she had appeared right behind Southern Lone Blade in the blink of an eye, with her dagger slipping right out at him. Southern Lone Blade might not have a quick movement speed, but his reaction was fast enough. Furthermore, having honed in on Svelte Dancer's attack strategy, he readily unleashed his cyclone even before his head turned to face her. But Svelte Dancer merely ignored the skill and continued her stab, undeterred. The players watching all heaved a sigh when they saw this. Everyone was hoping to see some high-level park and maybe pick up some techniques from the match, but Svelte Dancer's style of king was something no one could learn. Not even Goofy. This was all because no one would dare to just stand and take the damage from the warrior's cyclone unwaveringly. This lady was just that confident when it came to her equipment. The cutting whirl of blades from Southern Lone Blade's cyclone painfully lacerated her body when she closed in, but Svelte Dancer did not care for it as long as the damage it dealt to her HP was at the level at which she could still survive. As a result, it was Southern Lone Blade who had come away losing more of his HP from that one stab she delivered. The only regret Svelte Dancer had was of how quick Southern Lone Blade was at turning while executing his cyclone. It was to the extent that she could not get a grasp of when Southern Lone Blade's back would be shown to her. As such, she was unable to inflict a backstab on him. Southern Lone Blade's HP dropped a chunk after taking that stab. Had his equipment been worse or had he possessed lower HP, he would very well have been insta-killed with that one attack. The shock from this caused him to break into a bout of cold sweat. Canceling his cyclone, Southern Lone Blade immediately lifted his weapon and charged right at Svelte Dancer. This change-up was swift, showing great acuity in his grasp of direction. Anyone could tell that the man had plenty of practice in this particular maneuver. This time, Svelte Dancer was too close to defend herself from this and was immediately thrown out by Southern Lone Blade's charge. However, Svelte Dancer was not dazed when she struck the ground from the blow. Her fleet foot was currently on cooldown, so she activated stealth at once, but in the process of her disappearing, she saw Southern Lone Blade run over and suddenly kick up a cloud of white all over her, producing an amount of dust far more than how much a toss would have. Goofy and the others, all non-natives, lowered their heads to take a look at that small pithole Southern Lone Blade had kicked out and realized that it was the white dust Beishi City was famous for. Southern Lone Blade, who had completely utilized the terrain advantage that they were in, thought that he had already interrupted Svelte Dancer's stealth, but who would have expected for her stealth not to be interrupted once the dust settled and to remain imperceptible, despite being covered in powder. Southern Lone Blade, of course, was unaware that Svelte Dancer possessed the Shadow Walk skill that could forcibly put the user in the stealth state. As stealth could not be interrupted while that skill was in use, the white dust he kicked up was useless as well. Momentarily unable to understand what had happened, Southern Lone Blade did not dare to advance any further, so the man turned tail and ran. Most thieves would see a significant drop to their movement speed once they were in stealth and would be unable to give chase to any level 40 character. However, Svelte Dancer was decked out from head to toe with extremely powerful agility boosting equipment, and she had also chosen the Rogue Job class advancement, which was a whole tier better than Assassin's when it came to sneaking around. Its movement speed when stealthed was revised, making it such that rogues possessed a faster movement speed than which a thief or assassin could normally demonstrate. Thus, she had little to no difficulties when it came to chasing after a warrior like Southern Lone Blade. With how Shadow Walk would continue to consume mana while active, Svelte Dancer did not waste any time as she strove to pursue Southern Lone Blade. Southern Lone Blade's goal here was rather clear-cut. He was hoping to make it to the rocky outcrop and prop his back up against it in order to avoid giving Svelte Dancer the chance to use her bludgeon or backstab, the two powerful skills thieves had in their arsenal. Everyone was originally gathered beside the 9527 outcrop, so Southern Lone Blade very quickly got near the outcrop. Once there, he immediately pressed his back against the rocky surface even as he shrank himself. His left hand was holding the shield protecting his body, even as his right hand whirled that single-handed sword as he extended the weapon forward. By adopting such a stance, it would be a lot more troublesome for Svelte Dancer to attack him. The shield afforded him a complete defense of his left, and while the sword in his right hand might not provide as consummate defense as a shield, the fact that Svelte Dancer's weapon was a dagger meant that she would have to be very close to Southern Lone Blade in order for her hits to connect. Since Southern Lone Blade's wingspan exceeded Svelte Dancer's, and he was able to extend and brandish his sword like this, it would be tough for her to dart past it without being struck, which meant that her stealth would be interrupted and Southern Lone Blade would be able to see how she was attacking and, therefore, be able to react accordingly. Gufei glanced at the time. He knew that Svelte Dancer's Shadow Walk would consume 7% of her mana every second, which meant that she could at most sustain it for 14 seconds. As long as it was within this time frame, Southern Lone Blade would have sorely miscalculated if he intended to use that sword of his to interrupt Svelte Dancer's attack. Hopefully, the man would not be so astonished that he panicked when nothing appeared before him after he slashed the target. People who knew of Svelte Dancer's skill all thought that Southern Lone Blade had a lapse in judgment, while those who were unaware of the lady's skill thought that his defense was perfect, but his sudden step forward and unleashing of Cyclone was definitely a move beyond everyone's expectation. Not bad. Someone exclaimed approvingly. Gufei turned to look and saw that the one who had uttered this was young Master Han. For that person to offer praise so openly, it was truly as if the sun had risen from the west. Back to the battle, Southern Lone Blade looked completely surprised after he whirled out a cyclone, but he did not stop his spinning. Flame-cinched clothes and the others had no idea what was going on, but Gufei and the rest knew very well. Southern Lone Blade had managed to cut Svelte Dancer with that attack, but the man was completely taken aback by the fact that she remained in stealth after receiving damage. Even though her stealth was not interrupted, there was no doubt that Svelte Dancer had been damaged by it since this meant that she had taken damage from Southern Lone Blade's 2 whole cyclones. Evidently, Svelte Dancer was not having a good time dealing with it, so she quickly cancelled her stealth as she moved to distance herself. Cyclone was actually a skill that dealt continuous damage, so anyone who tried going head to head with it would see their HP dwindling fast, unless the victim was immediately sent flying away upon first contact. What was that? Was Southern Lone Blade able to see Svelte Dancer? War Without Wounds wondered aloud. It was premeditated. That man made a skillful calculation, as he had already determined just how fast Svelte Dancer would be moving after going into stealth. Moving toward the outcrop and putting up that defensive stance was his way of numbing the woman, and by calculating Svelte Dancer's movement speed and the distance between them, the man already considered when Svelte Dancer would arrive right beside him if she kept at that pace she was going, and that was the opportunity for him to strike. Young Master Han gave his breakdown of what had happened. Not bad, indeed, War Without Wounds marveled. If it were Sword Demon, he would probably be dead by now, right? It was apparent that, aside from Svelte Dancer and her outstanding equipment, there would not be any thief out there that could take 2 of Southern Lone Blade's Cyclone and a single charge but still survive. If I were in her shoes, I wouldn't eat that first Cyclone, and there's no way I'd get hit by that charge, too. Sword Demon quietly analyzed. Sister Svelte's being far too impatient. It would have been better if she had slowed down a little, Royal God Call commented. It can't be helped, that skill of hers lasts for a limited time, so she has no choice but to go fast. Sword Demon shook his head. So what would you do in her place? Royal God Call asked. I would cancel Shadow Walk the moment Southern Lone Blade got into the defensive posture. I'd use stealth to get close to him and wait, Sword Demon answered. While these experts discussed their battle strategy, the state of the duel saw even more changes. Just as young Master Han had said, Southern Lone Blade had properly calculated everything, and what he had considered was far more detailed than what young Master Han had imagined. Southern Lone Blade had made preparations against Svelte Dancer because he knew that the woman would be holding a grudge against him. Thus, carefully studying the entire process of their previous exchange, he had estimated Svelte Dancer's attack power, total HP, defense, and, of course, speed, seeing as this was her most congenital stat. When Southern Lone Blade realized that he would be going against Svelte Dancer for the assignment, he was honestly not that afraid of dueling with her. This truth was reflected in reality as well, so even though he did not expect Svelte Dancer to remain in stealth despite him dealing damage to her, this barely affected the overall situation of the fight. Such an indomitable act like going head-on against the damage from Cyclone and offering an attack of her own was something Svelte Dancer could do just once, and she must avoid this second Cyclone that Southern Lone Blade had just unleashed. Meanwhile, there was no way her movement speed while stealthed would allow her to escape the skill, so even if her stealth was not interrupted upon contact, she would still have to cancel it in the face of the attack. Otherwise, she would just be signing her own death warrant. Thus, the follow-up attack from Southern Lone Blade was already underway even as Svelte Dancer cancelled her Shadow Walk and was about to escape from the Cyclone. Charge. It was another charge. He might not have plenty of moves, but all that mattered was how versatile it could be used. In such a close range, even if Svelte Dancer knew that a charge was coming straight for her, she would also have great difficulty avoiding it. This situation was just like the first time this had happened, except this time, Svelte Dancer no longer had enough HP to take the damage from another charge. Dead again. Svelte Dancer was absolutely miserable at this point. Just as she watched Southern Lone Blade's sword come crashing straight at her, something suddenly blurred right past her, and a figure appeared right before her. With his moonlit nightfalls placed horizontal before him, the sword perfectly blocked Southern Lone Blade's sword tip which had come diving right toward the lady. The crisp clash of metal upon metal rang, but how could what little strength Gu Fei possessed be enough to block a warrior's charge? As such, the man was sent flying out along with Svelte Dancer when they collided. However, it was at this moment when Gu Fei did something only he was capable of doing. In the moment he lost his balance when the impact occurred, Gu Fei's sword swiftly retaliated with a cut of his own, and flames happened to flicker as the blade brushed past the attacker's body. Before Southern Lone Blade could even fully express his astonishment, he had already disappeared in a flash of white light. Even though the attacker was no more, the two that were struck by his charge continued to hurtle out in the same trajectory. Gu Fei was the one who took the blow, and he was not so weak that he would be insta-killed from a single charge. Svelte Dancer had been sent flying along with Gu Fei, but because Southern Lone Blade's charge was not powerful to the point that its damage could penetrate right through an entire person, even though the lady got launched into the air as she did, the damage she had sustained was negligible, and she was, therefore, still alive. In the end, everyone around was flabbergasted, none of them expecting Gu Fei to leap out at this time to lend a hand. It was fine if the man wanted to save Svelte Dancer, but to retaliate with a slash of his and insta-kill Southern Lone Blade. While that cut of his was a brilliant move, even Sword Demon and the others felt that Gu Fei had gone a tad overboard with it. To think that rascal would actually not go easy on her. Gu Fei climbed up to his feet and began dusting himself. Fuck, that's too damn shameless. To actually come out and lend a hand like that. Glue and the others, who had been enduring it all this while, were ultimately unable to tolerate it any longer. It was never explicitly stated that we couldn't do that. Why didn't you guys step out to aid him? Gu Fei asked. The six were visibly upset. Isn't this supposed to be a fair match? Svelte Dancer do not reciprocate, either. Who asked you to lend a hand? What else could I do? You two are being obstinate. It would be too unseemly if you got slain by him, Gu Fei retorted. But you didn't have to cut him down like that, either. Svelte Dancer argued. It was expedient. Didn't you want to get your revenge and kill him? I simply helped you with the deed, so how about it? There's no need for you to continue hunting him down now, right? Gufei asked. Fine, forget it. Svelte Dancer sighed. She found it too embarrassing for her to continue pestering Southern Lone Blade endlessly at the moment. Alright. Gufei nodded even as he pulled out his friends list and sent a message to Southern Lone Blade. It's settled. Chapter 608, A Storm is Coming. You were too quick. Southern Lone Blade had barely collected himself in the spawn point at this moment. Even though they had already agreed to this beforehand, Gufei's slash was far quicker than anything he had imagined, especially in a situation when that single move could completely extinguish his life. Southern Lone Blade was not so accommodating as to offer his life up just like that. He originally wanted to use his Windchaser's blessing to teleport himself to safety in that moment before Gufei's attack would snuff him out, perhaps fooling everyone. After all, there was no way he would not feel heartache from losing a level now that he was at level 40. No matter how indifferent he was toward it, it was still something he had spent a good amount of time and effort in. Ultimately, Gufei's attack was truly too fast, especially since he had blinked specifically for it. His sword had already plunged straight at Southern Lone Blade by the time he materialized between the two. Southern Lone Blade barely had any time to react before he got slain. It was a worthy death. Gufei expressed his condolences. Can I come back now? Southern Lone Blade sighed. Sure. My mates won't be troubled by this further, right? Southern Lone Blade asked. She doesn't even recognize them, replied Gufei. Okay, then. Southern Lone Blade was put at ease and began his walk back to the 9527 outcrop in the wilderness camp. Back over to Svelte Dancer, even though the lady said that she was over it, the fact was she was still feeling rather discontented over this whole affair. However, she had consecutively lost twice to Southern Lone Blade, so it obviously meant that it was not an issue of luck. Southern Lone Blade's equipment was not at the run-of-the-mill standard of the average player, either, and with how he had made a living with larceny, his park experience and skills were all well honed. At the same time, while Svelte Dancer's park skills were nothing to scoff at, she was a pay-to-win player through and through. With her equipment often being a tier above the other average players out there, she was used to obliterating her enemies like they were cabbage waiting to be shredded. Tragedy was all that awaited her for treating a skilled expert like Southern Lone Blade as a similar cannon fodder. Melancholia was keenly reflected in Svelte Dancer's expression as she sat listlessly by the 9527 outcrop at the moment. Do you wanna come play with us? Gufei could tell that the lady was still upset about all this, so he extended this invitation to give herself an activity that would take her mind off the matter. Money making? She asked, absolutely not having any interest in such stuff. Gufei laughed dryly. It's not like you're doing anything else at the moment. What are you guys doing, anyway? Svelte Dancer collected herself up a little. While she could not be bothered to participate, she figured that it would be fine to see what gimmick these people were up. Efficient monster grinding. Gufei shook his hand as he pointed to the crowd of players conscientiously learning the fighting routine from Brother Assist. How's that efficient? Svelte Dancer was also looking at Brother Assist on the outcrop. It is considered efficient for the majority of players out there. But your equipment is probably too high for this, Gufei said. The efficient monster grinding routine utilized actual combat techniques to let a player achieve even greater efficiency when killing monsters, but for someone like Svelte Dancer who possessed overly powerful equipment, what could be even more efficient when she was already capable of finishing off monster with one or two basic attacks? Thus, the efficient monster grinding style that Gufei pioneered in was essentially useless to her. How boring. Svelte Dancer languidly muttered after watching it for a moment, her interest waning. Level 40 monsters are too low for you, anyway. What's the level of monsters you usually grind against? Gufei asked. Level 50, Svelte Dancer replied. Have you killed level 60 monsters? Gufei asked. I have, but it's not as quick as level 50 monsters, Svelte Dancer answered. He. Gufei chuckled. Svelte Dancer's eyes instantly sparkled. You have a way to increase the efficiency of killing level 60 monsters, am I right? Of course, Gufei affirmed. Teach me. Svelte Dancer leapt to her feet. Sure, we're still a little busy here right now. I'll teach you once I'm free, Gufei promised. Call me when you're free. Svelte Dancer's melancholia was swept away in an instant. Instead, it was those experts eavesdropping in the two's conversation that were now feeling depressed. Using level 60 monsters to grind your levels, you guys are too much. These people all remonstrated. You can come too if you want to learn. Gufei chuckled. Who would not wish to do that? Everybody pounced on this chance to register, but Gufei ended up adding, but you'll first have to reallocate all your points to agility. With the amount of agility we've got, it should be about the same as your all agility build, yeah? Sword Demon and Royal God Call asked, while War Without Wounds already had tears streaming freely down his cheeks, for he knew he had no chance at all. Sure, but Royal, I won't be using a ranged fighting style, so your damage output might not be up to par if you swap to a melee weapon. In the end, it's gonna be counter-efficient for you, Gufei said. Even though archers could similarly use other weapons like daggers, there was still the weapon proficiency requirement that they needed to fulfill, and adding the fact that archers possess the bow and crossbow mastery skill, even if they equipped these melee weapons, the damage output of their basic attack would be hardly at the level a warrior or a thief could deal. This fighting style that Gufei and the others were teaching, aside from the limitations priests would face when it came to dealing damage, archers were the other job class that suffered. Needing to swap to a melee weapon, their damage output was incomparably lower than the other job classes possessed. As such, their efficiency was naturally dismal as well. Royal God Call's tears were flowing freely when he heard this. Out of the people in the crowd, only Sword Demon met the criteria Gufei stipulated. Glue and the others were not particularly interested in this, and when Royal God Call came to ask them about it, he learned that none of them were in the least bit concerned about level grinding, but were more interested in finding out how much profit they could make from this business venture. Call me once you're free. Svelte Dancer was now back to her usual self, and after reminding Gufei for the umpteenth time, no longer wasted any more time loitering here. And so, everybody waited until Southern Lone Blade arrived before officially beginning their discussion over this business that they were about to collaborate on. Since it was decided that they would be working together, the next step was the question of how the profits would be distributed. The 6 men of Young Master's Elite were largely agreeable to negotiating how the money would be split among themselves, mainly because they were not completely concerned with earning money in-game. Even though they were usually rather mean to each other, it was all done in jest and for fun. The words they exchanged were largely harmless and without malice. When splitting up their earnings, and someone ended up taking 800 gold coins while another took 300, everybody would argue and clown around but never take things to heart. Conversely, it was impossible for Southern Lone Blade's gang to do this. They were all playing this game to earn a living, so they placed great emphasis to this aspect of the game. As such, they were nationally very conscientious about such matters, which was why Southern Lone Blade did not even mention a word about what had transpired between him and Svelte Dancer and directly dove into the topic of cooperation when he arrived. Thus, right by the front of 9527, Brother Assist continued to take the class as Eternal Dominion moved about in the crowd to collect fees, and behind this very outcrop, a whole bunch of them gathered to covertly negotiate how they would split the profits for the work that they would be doing. First, young Master Han reported the earnings they had made from Brother Assist and Eternal Dominion's 2 rounds of classes yesterday, as well as the income they had made from today's chaotic events. The final sum was well in the 6 digits of gold coins, which left Southern Lone Blade's team utterly shell-shocked. Both parties then had a jolly time with the ensuing discussion. Fortunately, Southern Lone Blade's group was not too greedy, and Gufei's lot was not particularly stingy. As a result, one side did not mind a smaller cut of the lion's share, while the other was more than happy to be more generous, so how could they not have an easy and relaxed dialogue together? However, at the end of the day, this was still everyone's first time setting up such a business venture, so there were plenty of fine details neither party had thought of yet. Their decision was to take a play-it-by-ear approach and to develop as they explored this together. Tentatively, Southern Lone Blade's team would initially be under Gufei's guidance and would make up the main group of instructors. Meanwhile, the rest would be in charge of other miscellaneous duties that came with this venture, and any issue that cropped up would be further deliberated and decided together. Once the negotiations were over, Brother Assist was left to take charge of all the tutoring over by 9527, while Gufei and Eternal Dominion brought Southern Lone Blade and his men over to the White Mill to begin preparation for the next phase of their business. The 7 men were about to oversee the teaching for this map, so they of course must first learn the relevant fighting routines from Gufei and Eternal Dominion. To prevent a reenactment of what had happened over at the wilderness camp that inadvertently attracted overwhelming attention with the surrounding players, all of them specifically sought a corner where there were hardly any people around and kidnapped the monsters from far away to begin the lesson. Once it was over, Gufei and Eternal Dominion had nothing left to do. But Southern Lone Blade's team still needed to familiarize themselves with what they had been taught. They were not at the level most players were currently at, but because the expertise each man possessed remained unchanged, and their receptivity to new techniques was much better than the average player, as well as how they represented almost every job class, the routine they had to learn became all the more comprehensive. Take how Gufei directly taught the mage Flame-Singed Clothes his close combat mage fighting routine. At the end of the day, most mages would not be wielding a sword and fighting monsters. This made it hard for them to be anywhere near as effective against level 40 monsters, since mages would have to mainly focus on using Twin Incineration and the additional attack traits to dish out damage. Melee combat-wise, Flame-Singed Clothes had quite a frighteningly heart-pounding time learning from Gufei. Every time Gufei struck, it made him want to shrink away while he stood next to the man. Honestly, considering how it was not too long ago that they were butting heads with each other, Flame-Singed Clothes still had difficulties getting used to Gufei's sword not slashing at him. Furthermore, Glue, Patty Scent Pastures, and Verdant Timber had a much easier time using the efficient monster grinding style due to their job classes. But since they were only in charge of teaching the routine, and the key was to demonstrate and instruct the players on how to use it, the actual effectiveness of these routines would ultimately be different from person to person. Logically speaking, players with better equipment could nationally obtain even greater effectiveness. But there came a threshold in standard of equipment where the efficient grinding method would become ineffectual. Essentially, the efficient monster grinding routine Gufei taught would only be good for the average, middle-class players. After Gufei and Eternal Dominion finished tutoring, the 2 men punctually went back to log off, leaving the rest of the busy work to these gamers who devoted their hearts and lives entirely to the game. At this time, the situation over by the wilderness camp was sharply deteriorating as how everyone had expected. More and more players arrived until the grinding map finally reached past the capacity in terms of player saturation. Batches after batches of graduates were in the zone, yet they were completely unable to get even one monster to fight. They had all spent the gold to learn the routine, yet there was no monster for them to execute it on. Their hopes of rapidly accumulating experience points and level were nothing but pipe dreams at this point, which only caused depression among countless players. This would hardly qualify as a MMO if such a backdrop did not induce the players to resort to kill stealing. The chaos of this scramble kept escalating even as the battlefield continued to spread. The smarter players had already left this hellscape that was fraught with danger. Kill steal? There was no point to do that when considering the present situation, since any player that was attempting to kill steal would very well find themselves treated like a monster and have their own lives stolen in the next minute. There was no way any solo player could make any substantial stand in such chaos, and the various large guilds of Beishi City finally made their debut. This was hardly because the large guilds of Beishi City were slow to act. With how sudden the promotion of the efficient monster grinding routine, and how the wilderness camp was a famous locale for solo grinding, since these large guilds were focused on group grinding, they were entirely cut off from such grinding maps. In the beginning, there might be certain individuals in the guild who had passion for solo grinding, but these individuals were often the sort that was antisocial or withdrawn from the main body of their guilds, or they were the sort that were looking to secretly squirrel themselves away and work hard in an effort to resurface with a bang. The discovery of this wondrous new style was not something these people would report to the guild about. As a result, quite a few smaller groups had gathered in the wilderness camp these last few days, while the top guilds in Beishi City were comparatively late to the party. In any case, It was evident that the three largest guilds of Beishi City had come prepared. There were hardly any complications after they entered the wilderness camp, and the map was easily divided into three separate sectors almost instantly. Those players still dazedly embroiled in kill-stealing quickly got that nothing more was left to the show when they saw these three major guilds enter the gauntlet. Still, who would be willing to give up so easily just like that? There were those who were willing to keep trying their luck as they continued to hang around the grinding map, and then there were those who immediately headed back to call their friends along, in hopes of mustering up more manpower. The reaction from the three guilds was swift as they immediately adapted their strategy and divided half of the map. These guilds had their scruples as well. After all, this was not a piece of equipment, but a grinding map that gave people 2 times to 3 times the experience points they would normally earn over the same period of time. This was a commodity that everybody needed, and for the three guilds to dominate this piece of land in such a manner, that was as good as them going against all the players in Beishi City. While the guilds were strong, none of them dared to force the people's hand and pit themselves against the masses. This change in strategy was extremely effective. When the players returned and saw that half of the map was occupied by the three major guilds, and that the other half was just a free-for-all of random players, anyone with half a brain would know which side would be easier to contend fault with. Thus, the wilderness camp once more became a strange sight, with half of the grinding map split into 3 sectors, each harmoniously grinding in an orderly fashion, while the other half was divided into an innumerable amount of small plots that were constantly in motion and being fought over among the players. With all the parking everywhere, flashes of white light intermittently sparkled. Descending wheels of flames, cyclones, bludgeons were being used on every inch of this land. All this happened over the course of one night. By then, the members of Young Master's elite knew how to act, and had long since left the wilderness camp. After the guilds entered the grinding map, the tutoring business for the efficient monster grinding routine essentially could no longer exist in any shape or form. As long as one player in the guild knew the routine, even if they were to start the same venture, they would be able to do so internally, without the need to hire any outsider for this. Additionally, players that came after were all called here by their friends to snatch a spot on the map, even if they were not privy to the efficient monster grinding routine in the first place. Their friends would naturally impart it to them, so those innocent days when players would eagerly come forth and register to learn the routine would never be repeated again after lasting the whole 2 days. This situation, however, worked as an early warning to young Master Han and the others. Guilds would be a huge enemy to their development of this business. Level 6 guilds had over thousands of members in them. All they had to do was send a representative to learn the routine, and it would be spread to the entire guild. Later, when they descended on the maps, they would be the ones dominating a huge chunk of land. We'll need to make people register in advance. Thinking about this, young Master Han was all the more resolute and decisive about the matter. From tomorrow onward, announce that registration is required to learn the efficient grinding method for the White Mill grinding map. Who did the inspection for that map today? That would be me. Royal Godcall raised his hand. That place is slightly smaller than the wilderness camp, so I reckon it shouldn't have a problem holding somewhere around 5,000 players grinding at any given time. Royal, you've disregarded a complication. A saturation of 5,000 players is based on the current usual means of grinding, but once the players have a total grasp of the fighting routine, where the average efficiency of players will double in the least, it means that the time to kill a single monster right now will let players kill 2 monsters then, instead. In other words, if a single player needs 3 spawn points to continuously grind, that very same player will then need 6 separate spawns once they grasp the routine. As such, we need to lower the number of players for the map's saturation, meaning, the White Mill will only need 3,000 players. Brother Assist said. Royal Godcall had a painful look on his face. Brother Assist, next time, just tell me directly that I'm wrong, and that 3,000 should be the right count. There's no need for you to explain to me your reasoning. What's the situation over in the wilderness camp now? Young Master Han asked Brother Assist. The 3 largest guilds in Beishi City, White Wind, Torrential Rain, and Winter Season, occupy half of the map. They are all level 6 guilds, numbering a total of 3,150 players, but there's no way every member gets online at the same time, so I estimate that there should only be about 2,500 members present there. Brother Assist shared. 2,500 players? Half of the map isn't gonna be enough now, is it? Young Master Han asked. If they all grind together, yes, that won't be enough, but these large guilds usually organize group grinds, and they have just received the news and began their domination of the wilderness camp. They are all still in the initial stages of holding the place and have yet to popularize the grinding routine, so they have yet to officially start their leveling, Brother Assist explained. As for the other half of the map, that's plenty livelier. Currently, it is still in that chaotic massacre state we've caught a glimpse of earlier, so few are able to safely secure their spots, much less any solo players. However, seeing how the situation is panning out, there's a strong possibility that some of the second-class guilds will work together to step in and subsequently split out another half of the map again. Sure enough, parties and groups still have the advantage in the end. Young Master Han nodded. Perhaps, we can take the initiative and contact guilds first, directly teaching them the efficient grinding routine, Brother Assist offered. It's not the time yet. Young Master Han waved his hand dismissively. They won't realize the benefit of this if we market this to them. Right now, they will only feel that a mere expenditure of 99 gold coins is sufficient for them to enjoy the benefit here and will completely see no need to pull out any lump sum for this. Thus, we will still follow our original line of thought, except this time, we'll be much quicker. Looks like everybody has to sacrifice a bit of their time presently, with everyone showing up in force and getting on tutoring. Southern Lone Blade's team and us 6 make 13 instructors. We'll cultivate a whole grinding map worth of people at one go in the shortest time possible. Yeah. Everyone nodded. Also, we'll announce the establishment of our workshop along with the post of us accepting registration for the White Mill. Let everyone know that we're the workshop that's hosting this particular venture. Young Master Han said. We haven't discussed what our workshop's name should be called. Brother Assist cried out. We'll go with 1,000 Miles Drunk Workshop, making use of Miles' name. Any of you have any thoughts about this? Young Master Han asked. We don't have any. The people all shook their heads. But the question is if he has any issues with this. Have you asked him? Yup, Young Master Han replied. Did you really ask him? Brother Assist was suspicious. He was the one who was about to make the post, so he would be the one Goofy would look to slay if he had any problems with this. Asking him and not asking him about it is all the same. The point is, he won't be visiting the forums, Young Master Han said. Fuck. Brother Assist was crestfallen. Sure enough, that man did not ask Goofy at all. As a precaution, Brother Assist decided that he would confirm with Goofy before making the post. Also, the money for all the players registering shall be directly sent to Miles' mailbox. Any of you have further questions? Young Master Han asked. Issues about money were always a little more sensitive, but because they had already seen what Goofy's personality was usually like, they knew how trustworthy he was as a person, which was precisely why Young Master Han had made such a suggestion in the first place. Everyone nodded, and in the end, it was Brother Assist who had once again asked, Say, you haven't discussed any of this with Miles, have you? What's there to discuss? The collection of money is such a big deal. If he's unwilling to do it, I'll gladly take over. Young Master Han said. Fuck. Fine, Miles, it is. Brother Assist did not dare to question this decision further. If Young Master Han oversaw this task, Brother Assist suspected that they might end up with bottles of liquor instead of gold coins when it was time to split the profits. Chapter 609, A Heavy Bombshell. While Young Master Han was prepared to throw a whole bunch of things under Goofy's banner, Brother Assist was not about to casually make this rash decision, so he decided to wait for Goofy to get online and give the go-ahead before going forward. Thankfully, dawn was arriving, and a night of gaming had ended once more. Southern Lone Blade and the others were getting ready to log out, but because Brother Assist knew that Goofy now had the habit of logging on early in the morning, he decided to delay his log off and wait for him to get online and get the go-ahead for everything from Goofy, personally, before making his move. Upon further thought, Brother Assist felt that he was really acting like an odd jobber, worrying over all these miscellaneous matters for the group, while Royal God Call, Sword Demon, and the others lived like they were young masters, grinding when they wanted, questing when they felt like it, and resting when they should be resting. What made this worse was the fact that he was rather happy doing all these odd jobs. Brother Assist was crushed. Was this the life he was destined to lead? Having nothing to do while waiting for Goofy to get online, Brother Assist inadvertently found himself strolling over to the wilderness camp. The battle that had raged overnight had yet to settle despite it being the morning now. The struggle for the grinding map continued, except it was unknown just which wave of players was presently fighting it out after a whole night had passed. However, there were improvements from the initial chaos, as a few more powerful parties had already managed to get a footing and segmented an area for themselves. Unless they were newcomers that had no idea of the present situation, no one else would head to these areas and attempt to fight for the land any longer. Brother Assist no longer dared to keep loitering around the map after taking those handful of steps in, for he soon discovered that plenty of hostile and alert gazes were thrown his way. As such, he did his best to show to everyone that he was only passing by before he circled around and left. The other half of the map that the three major guilds occupied was a lot more organized in comparison. After a whole night of practice, the members from the three major guilds had already gotten a good grasp of the efficient monster grinding routine, and even though there was definitely not enough room for all 3,000 players to utilize the routine, it was not too big a problem for the guild since they could institute a systematic deployment. There was no way people would be able to grind for 24 hours, right? With everyone taking up an 8-hour shift, these players could all be divided into 3 batches that took turns level grinding. No one would be unhappy with the 8-hour allocation as that was already a lot of time. There was still plenty of other things that everyone could do in game. Leveling was not everything. After all, Brother Assist was originally hoping that these 2 separate groups would have players logging off to rest up around this time, giving him a short time to earn a bit of extra by threading the needle and grab a few monsters in between. But seeing how things were set up on this end, he felt that it was better to just banish the thought. Evidently, these players who had successfully held their ground in this grinding map would be unwilling to cough it up, especially those from the other half of the map that had managed to seize their foothold after a whole night of slaughter. Brother Assist started to wonder if these players would end up grinding until they succumbed to exhaustion. In the end, after making his round of the wilderness camp, Brother Assist made his way back to the city. He had barely slept much the day before, so he was already very tired at this point in time, especially since there was nothing left to do now, and the dull waiting only made him feel all the more lethargic. Brother Assist made a mental note to ask for Goofy's real-world contact when he got online, so he would not have to go through this ordeal next time. Just as he was feeling helpless, the familiar chime of the friends list from the system rang, and Brother Assist saw that it just happened to be Goofy who had finally gotten online. Quickly, as if afraid that Goofy would run off on him, Brother Assist fired off a message. "Morning. You've yet to turn in." Goofy replied. "I was waiting for you," Brother Assist said. "What's the matter?" Goofy asked. "Give me your phone number." Thinking from a long-term perspective, Brother Assist decided that it would be prudent to ask this first. "What for?" Goofy found this strange. "Given how unpredictable your gaming time is and how tiring it is for me to wait here just to get a hold of you, having your number will make things much more convenient for me," Brother Assist answered. "Oh." Goofy chuckled before giving Brother Assist his contact number. Brother Assist felt as if he had just settled something important, before he broached the issue at hand. "I'm about to start the promotion for our workshop, and everyone decided to call it 1,000 Miles Drunk Workshop. Do you have any issues using your name?" Doesn't that mean that those who have anything to do with the workshop will come contact me?" "I can't deal with that," Goofy cried. "Don't worry about that. We'll just clarify that we have a separate contact person," Brother Assist said. "Oh, then, it's fine," Goofy said. "Also, everyone wants you to take charge of collecting fees," Brother Assist mentioned. "Why?" Goofy asked. "Everyone feels a bit more at ease having you do it. After all, you're the one who managed to bring together both groups," Brother Assist replied. "Oh." Goofy had yet to give his consent. "If you don't have any issues with it, we'll go ahead and do this," Brother Assist said. "No issues here." "All right, then, I shall take my leave." Brother Assist and Goofy said their goodbyes, and the former went offline, eager to craft the post for the forums. The lethargy he had been feeling seemingly disappeared once he had something to do, and his whole body felt invigorated. He had already thought about the content of the post he was going to make, so it did not take him long to type it all out. Brother Assist was of course familiar with which forums he would be posting this, but because he was aiming for a wider audience this time around, he did not limit himself just to the official Parallel World forums. Brother Assist made sure to repost it on a few more popular forums, using his renowned IGN Brother Assist to boot, for it was a name whose reputation in the forums that was comparable with sword demons in MMOs. Hey, this is absolutely colossal news. I'm really looking forward to see how players would respond. After Brother Assist was done with his work, and he took a moment to admire his handiwork, only to realize that there were already replies to some of the posts he had made at the start. There were exhortations, as well as people inquiring after an insider's look, and even those who were seeking to register. Brother Assist felt a glowing sense of pride grip him before he finally willingly retired for some rest. Just as Brother Assist had expected, this was indeed colossal news. In the time he was about to fall asleep, the posts he had made were being reposted at an astonishing rate. Brother Assist only posted to the official Parallel World forums and a few well-known online forums, but it has now reached the third-party sites, smaller forums, private spaces, servers, and so on. The netizens were quick to spread this news in every avenue. Some websites even treated the post as news and reported it, and there were even some web reporters who were already flocking to interview the eponymous person in question. Regarding the MMO community, it was not the efficient monster grinding routine that caught their eye but the names of Sword Demon, Royal God Call, War Without Wounds, and Brother Assist, who were all considered superstars within the community, and their announcement of opening a workshop together was what really captivated everyone's attention. To reframe this as entertainment news, it would be as if the four Heavenly Kings one had gathered and announced that they would be putting on a concert together. As for the name Thousand Miles Drunk, only those playing Parallel World were terror-stricken by the news. But since the game was considered as a new rising star in the entire MMO community, people who knew of the name were much less than those who knew of Southern Loneblade. While Southern Loneblade was not a particularly famous expert, he had excellent word of mouth among professional gamers and was famed for his honesty and reliability in his line of work. Brother Assist specially used his name in the posts to increase the credibility of their workshop. With so many big IGNs drawing so much attention, everybody began carefully pondering on just what was this efficient monster grinding routine, which actually drew these fabled experts to poke their heads out and step into the ranks of virtual money making. It had just been 2 days since the advent of this routine, so only an extremely small portion of players in Parallel World were aware of it. Now that it reared its head on the forums, it drew a huge amount of discussion, and information regarding the wilderness camp was swiftly leaked. In the game, even more players began to make a beeline for Mage City, and the magnitude was many times greater than the last time. Before, it was no more than a bit of word of mouth, and unassuming rumors that were being spread about what was happening, so how could it compare to the announcement that had stirred the entire MMO community now? 2 hours after Brother Assist had made his post, the players over in the wilderness camp could clearly feel the pressure increase. This was because there was a seemingly endless number of players surging into the map, and a good portion of these players was not here to kill steal but to watch and observe. Instead, this was something entirely different from the pressure they had felt the night before, and none of them could make heads or tails just what was happening. 4 hours after Brother Assist had made his post, the players in the wilderness camp continued to increase, and this time, even the 3 major guilds there felt the pressure. A huge number of players had appeared all around them, and none of them seemed to care for the fact that they were the 3 major guilds found in the city. Similarly, none of these newcomers was here to kill steal but was merely there to watch, which made the 3 guilds feel as if they were at a loss on what to do. They had already received their orders long ago, and the 3 guilds were working together to stand their ground, killing anyone who would dare to kill steal from them. But now that all these people present were not here to kill steal, how should these players be dealt with? Should they kill them or not? To make matters even worse, the 3 guilds' collaboration was already the top existence in Mage City, so there would not be any other organization out there that would surpass them. However, the number of players currently gathered around them to watch easily outnumbered them, and there was no telling if those people knew each other or otherwise. In short, They were all observing the players from the three major guilds grinding on the monsters like they were monkeys at the zoo, enjoying the show while they pointed and gawked. The players from the three guilds were all surprised and felt uneasy, and it just so happened that each of the guild leaders was not online at the time, so there was no one in the know that could give out an order. It was only when the players later ran to inquire after the situation that they slowly got clued in. At the moment, there was actually a good portion of players present in the wilderness camp that were not from Beishi City, so it was no wonder that these people all viewed the members of the three major guilds as if they were nothing. How could outsiders know about them, after all? Meanwhile, through careful observation, these outsiders had discovered that the efficient monster grinding routine truly lived up to its name, and it was indeed as efficient as was promoted, allowing players who had a mastery of the routine to double their rate of leveling at the very least. It was unknown which player it was that suddenly reminded the crowd, causing everyone to recall that the next lesson would not be here in Wilderness Camp but over by the White Mill, instead. So hordes of these players began making their way over with great enthusiasm. The scene over by the White Mill was nothing like that of the Wilderness Camp. A handful of players, who were clueless about this efficient monster grinding routine, had been dutifully leveling when they suddenly saw a black shadow descend over the horizon, following which, a stampede of players surged forth around them. No one had ever witnessed such a scene of overwhelming numbers after playing MMOs for such a long time, and these players, who were simply leveling, were each left dumbfounded at the sight. Meanwhile, the players, who had come to watch, began to spread throughout the entire map upon arrival, but Gufei and the others had done exceptionally well keeping things under wraps. Having made sure not to reveal any bit of the routine to any outsiders when Southern Lone Blade and the others learned and practiced the routine there, hardly any trace of the efficient monster grinding routine was being used in the White Mill right now. So these players could only invade the map in high spirits, only to leave later in disappointment. After the first batch of players left crestfallen, there was yet another swarm of players that came in great exuberance. It was like an unending stream of people that started from Beishi City, made their way to the wilderness camp, and ended up at the White Mill, transforming it into a path for all these tourists to take. Meanwhile, those players, who had ended up with nothing to show after making it to the White Mill, went a whole round and found their way back to the wilderness camp. This time, they did not merely watch, many of them began to learn the routine. Furthermore, these sudden newcomers evidently did not know the rules and did not bother to ask. Watching a player fighting the campfire patroller and learning by imitation, just how displeased did these players who had spent good money to learn it feel? Aside from the friction that came from this, there were also those who had learned a bit of the routine and began to search for monsters to practice with, but because these people had no idea of the bloodthirsty history that had happened across the previous day and continued to treat this grinding map like any other average map, attacking any monster that appeared, these people found themselves on the receiving end of other players' attacks, instead. Even so, it was indeed impossible to contain the mass of onlookers. This was especially true for players that were not native to Beishi City and were clueless on the present state of affairs. These people did not even have any regard for the three major guilds as they minded their own business and hunted the monsters that spawned. How could the three guilds compromise so easily like this? Naturally, it was necessary for them to mete out the punishment for these offenders, but the problem was that the kill stealing had already begun all over their turf, and the thousands of players from the three guilds were having difficulties dealing with them all appearing everywhere. After settling things in the east, there were more incidents sprouting out in the west. Additionally, these interlopers did not know each other, so none of them cared about the death of the others and continue with their own search for monsters to kill. The members of the three guilds found themselves running all over the place, tiring themselves out in the process as they could only spare the time and effort to kill these players rather than the monsters. In the end, that half of the map that they originally occupied got forcefully halved yet again. The guild members, who found themselves thrust in the core of the map, were completely astounded by what was happening. They were already so busy, yet these players around still harbored no hostility toward them. That was when they realized that these people essentially had no idea that the three guilds had already staked a claim on this part of the map and would kill all who attempted to kill steal. They quickly thought to announce this particular information to the people, but upon seeing the sea of players out there, these guilds were too timid to see it through the end. Right now, that half of the map they had given had no fewer than 10,000 players, while these guilds barely had 1,000 present. Even if everyone from the 3 guilds went out in a show of force, they would still have to properly think it through. At the moment, the number of players present in the wilderness camp continued to increase. In the beginning, it was just the locals of Beishi City, but the players from adjacent cities soon made their way over, and those from the further cities followed thereafter. Gufei, who was supervising his students leveling at a level 35 grinding map, saw a seemingly unending stream of players make their way down the main road, all in a single direction, not too far from him. Surprise gripped him, as the last time he saw so many players gathering like this was during that PvP tournament. Gufei was watching this caravan of humans trundling along, and one by one, his students also took note of this strange phenomenon. They, too, stopped their leveling and shuffled close to Gufei, each of them stretching their necks out in an attempt to inquire about what was going on. "I don't know," Gufei exclaimed. "Shall we go take a look?" a student suggested. "What's there to look?" "Go back and continue your leveling," Gufei rejected. "Sir," another student timidly said, "this is a game and not a class." Gufei was momentarily stunned, realizing that he had truly mixed up his role here. Having spent these past few days supervising his students to learn his efficient monster grinding style, he really got the feel of teaching a class to the point that he actually treated leveling as part of the syllabus. Gufei could not help but let out a self-deprecating laugh at this thought as he quickly corrected himself. "Come, let's take a look." Gufei's students followed him toward the flow of people. Gufei, with his students in tow, trailed after the moving crowd, his heart seizing as the 9,527 rocky outcrop slowly came into view. He could vaguely sense that, perhaps, what was happening had something to do with the tutoring business venture they were currently setting up. Just as he was leading his student onward, Gufei suddenly felt someone checking him out from within the crowd. Turning in the direction of the sensation, sure enough, he saw a male and female player, whose gazes were on him. When the two noticed that Gufei had discovered them, they did not choose to avert their gazes. Instead, they decisively broke off from the crowd and were walking straight toward Gufei. Gufei stood still, one hand of his was already delving in his dimensional pocket, touching the hilt of his moonlit nightfalls, while the other extended out to gesture for his students to come to a halt. "What's the matter, sir?" a student asked, before realizing that a pair was making a beeline for them. These two were at least able to observe the mood, and when they saw how Gufei was on guard, they immediately stopped their approach. The man smiled before nodding. This was his way of showing that he meant no malice. In the end, the pair saw the look of disappointment on Gufei's face, which left them a little confused. While the two were still a little lost at what had just happened, the two nevertheless continued their way forward, asking Gufei once they were standing right before him. "Excuse me, but are you 1,000 miles drunk?" "That's me." Gufei nodded. "Ah, how do you do? We are online reporters from Fun Games Network. To think we'd meet you out here." That calm expression the two had instantly disappeared, as the pair became visibly excited. "What?" Gufei's eyes widened, thinking that he had misheard them. "We're reporters from Fun Games Network. My name's Damu, and this lady's Mewdu." The man introduced himself and his partner at once. "Reporters?" Gufei was still suspicious that there was a problem with his ears. "Yes, if it's convenient for you, we hope to be able to get an interview with you." The male reporter by the name of Damu showed a very sincere expression, while the lady reporter Mewdu looked on expectantly. "I interview?" Gufei was still flabbergasted. Alpha hurriedly darted forward. He knew that, even though Gufei was an expert, he was actually very unfamiliar with the MMO community as a whole. Thus, he came forward to whisper into Gufei's ear, "Fun Games Network is currently our country's largest online gaming website, and its site can be considered as a media organization, so it naturally has its own reporters as well. As a site specially dedicated to esports, they have quite a number of reporters stationed online to make it easier for them to interview some of the more popular players in MMOs. Most of them are part-time." "I see." Gufei nodded. He did not have much difficulty understanding all this, it was just that he had never interacted with such circles, so he found everything to be very fresh and new. "Ahem. So do you have time now?" Damu and Mewtwo found Goofei's reaction to be very refreshing just from what they had seen alone. This man was currently the fearsome expert that stirred up huge storms in Parallel World. Could he actually be a novice? Also, just what was going on with the whole lot of children following behind him? What do you guys wish to ask? Goofei asked. Why don't we find a quieter location first? The two suggested. Goofei had yet to say a word regarding this, but the students behind him were already far more animated than he was. They all learned from Alpha the intention of these two players for approaching them, so they dragged Goofei to the side even as they beckoned the two reporters with great enthusiasm, telling the three adults that they would be bringing them to a quieter location. Goofei had no choice but to be at the mercy of his students, and the quieter location that these students brought them was just under a tree a good distance away from the flow of players on the main road. Alright, ask away. Goofei said. May we know just who these children are? Their first question was about this site before them. Chapter 610, The Interview. They are students from one of my classes, Goofei answered truthfully. Your students? Damu and Mewtwo were astonished. Of course, it was not rare to find students playing games, but for someone to call these his students, that was a curious thing, indeed. Then, may I know I'm their teacher, of course. Phys Ed, Goofei said matter-of-factly. Oh. A PE teacher. The two felt that this was a little reasonable. Sure enough, plenty of people did not consider a PE teacher as a real teacher. Actually, physical education is just the work I do for a living. My real identity is a martial artist who specializes in the practice of Kung Fu. Goofei earnestly offered. Is that so? Then, we've truly been disrespectful, Damu and Mewtwo quickly replied, but that was merely the superficial words they had said out of courtesy. At the moment, both reporters were actually privately messaging each other. Martial artist. Is this man insane? Perhaps he's an imposter? His equipment matches the rumors. I think we'll need to find a way to verify his identity. With this discussion over, Damu spoke. I learned before that you sold your Moonlit Nightfalls for an exorbitant amount. I wonder if that's because you've gotten an even more terrific weapon? Goofei chuckled. That's just me and my friend joking around with each other. I'm still wielding Moonlit Nightfalls. There had indeed been rumors that the sword's sale was a sham. Damu was waiting for Goofei to give such an answer as he continued to ask. We've long since admired that sword of yours. I wonder if it's okay with you to let us see the sword for ourselves? Of course, you can. Goofei withdrew Moonlit Nightfalls and designated it to display its stats. The sword itself was far too high leveled, so there was no way for other players to appraise it without making such a designation. The display design in Parallel World was often used, and it was necessary when players set up their stalls. The pair admired Moonlit Nightfalls together, and the stats they saw indeed matched the information they had collected on it, so they were naturally sighing in awe for quite a bit. The interview had also officially begun at this point, with Mewtwo taking out her quill and notepad, looking exactly like Brother Assist. While Damu cleared his throat, it was apparent that he would be the main interviewer with the questions. This sword has a skill called Impending Nightfall. Just what sort of skill is that? Damu was evidently someone who enjoyed discussing the objective issue at hand. Oh, I'm unsure of that myself, as I am unable to activate it even now, Goofei answered. Skill activation was not a secret, and plenty of players knew about the existence of such a requirement. Damu and Mewtwo, these two reporters, were deeply knowledgeable of all things in Parallel World, so they did not waste time exploring this mystery and proceeded to ask the next question. Earlier, you said that you're a martial artist. Just what does that generally mean? Having confirmed Goofei's identity, they of course had to clarify what he had meant before, which they had initially dismissed as the ravings of a madman. Even if they were going to write about him being a lunatic, they would still need plausible proof. Oh, I was born into a family of Kung Fu practitioners and have been learning it since young, Goofei explained. That's probably why you're so powerful in this game when it comes to parking, right? Naturally. Goofei nodded. Could you perhaps demonstrate a move or two to us? The two asked. Our teacher's sword is used to slay people and not for demonstrations. Alpha was standing beside Goofei when he arrogantly interjected, giving pause to Damu and Mewtwo. Could this man really be some legendary martial arts expert? In the end, It was a red-faced Gufei that turned and glared at Alpha. Go and stand in a corner. Embarrassed, he apologized to the two. Sorry about that. Kids are just immature like that. What do you guys wish to see? The two were surprised. They were originally thinking that Gufei must truly be an expert if he reacted in the way Alpha had, but when they saw how courteous and polite Gufei actually acted, the two thought there must be nothing to it. Thinking for a moment, they decisively said, "Then, use moonlit nightfalls to show us something." No problem. It was rare for Gufei to meet civilians who were not part of the community that showed interest in his kung fu, so he cherished such an opportunity tremendously. Pulling the sword out and beginning his display. He felt it would be a waste to show them a sword style that was too profound, since that would just be lost on the two. Thus, Gufei decided to demonstrate to them a more foundational sword style that he used to familiarize sword techniques. Gufei's 20 years of honing was definitely the real deal, as even an outsider could easily tell how smooth his execution of the sword style was, but that was the extent that they could understand from what they saw. In terms of how visually exciting it was far from what people would usually see in the movies. Movies and television would have changing camera angles, with electric fans blowing their hair, background music to heighten the atmosphere, and of course, that would look far more awesome than what Gufei was showing right now. Regarding Gufei's performance at the moment, these outsiders felt it was just a little better than watching broadcast gymnastics. But at least the actions he was doing did not seem to have too many obvious repetitions. When Gufei was done with the entire routine and returned to a neutral stance, even his students could tell that the two interviewers were clearly unimpressed. They all already understood that Gufei was the real deal, so they felt that their teacher's display really could not be compared to Alpha's boastful rejection. Ahem! It was splendid. Damu and Mutu were very diplomatic about it. Even though neither of them knew what they should make of it, they still felt that they needed to applaud after Gufei finished demonstrating. You just. Gufei continued to be humble. How long have you been practicing that? Damu continued his interview. Over 20 years. Does that mean that you've only reached the state of dominance in the game through the utilization of your kung fu, something that you've been practicing for over 2 decades in the real world? Damu asked. Of course. He felt that this question had already been asked before. Don't you feel that this is somewhat unfair to the other players? Damu finally asked a question that he felt was more incisive. Oh, what do you mean? Gufei was a little lost. Since you're an expert in this kung fu, do you feel that it's fair to defeat so many normal players? Damu asked. Gufei looked quizzically at him. Will being defeated by them make it fair? Eh? Damu was stunned. It's precisely because I'm an expert in this that I easily beat up all the common players, isn't that fair? Gufei asked. Damu was astounded, wondering to himself, that's right. It's totally fair. Weird, why would I ask such a question? He felt that his head was in a bit of a mess, and even though this question was an impromptu utterance, he felt that that should not have been the case. As if what he meant to ask was lost with Gufei's reply. What he meant to say is that, with you bringing your real-world skills into the game, it places you on a different starting line than the other players. Do you think that it's fair? Mutu spoke up, as she could tell that Damu had been stumped by his question. I understand what you mean now. From your perspective, you would indeed consider this to be unfair, but the problem you've posed is actually meaningless. For this is akin to how everyone has a different personality, nationality, looks, family background, environment, and so on. Each of these factors are all distinct, and nobody has ever really been able to start on the same starting line, so to speak. As every MMO can be seen as a virtual life in itself, this alone makes it extremely similar to real life. And the initial foundation each player brings into the game will become factors that lead everyone to different starts and paths. An example is those players who can only play Parallel World for 2 hours and those who can spend 10+ hours gaming. How can there be any sort of fairness there? Mutu swiftly recorded down what Gufei had said even as Damu nodded while he listened, digging out another question from what he had just said. In other words, you don't spend plenty of time gaming every day? Damu asked. Yeah, recently, it's the winter holiday, so I have a bit more time, Gufei answered. You don't spend a lot of time gaming, yet you can maintain a level that puts you among the players at the forefront. Can you perhaps tell us how you do it? Damu asked. Gufei scratched his head. I don't really know how to answer this question because this is the first time I'm playing MMOs, so there's still plenty of things I have no clue about. All I do every day is log on, do the things I want to do, and just slowly accumulate things like experience points and level, you know? Things you want to do, what's that exactly? Bounty mission, Gufei answered. Damu was astonished. Are you saying that you've been using bounty mission to get the EXP needed to level up? Actually, it's more like after level 30. Gufei recalled. Also, you can't say the missions accounts for all of my EXP. Occasionally, I'll go to a grinding map and farm monsters. Why is it that you rely on something as risky as bounty mission to level up? Is that how confident you are? Damu asked. It's a hobby. Gufei admitted. Hobby? Damu gulped. Yeah, I feel that it's a lot more entertaining doing park with others than slaying monsters in the grinding maps, Gufei explained. Damu and Midu were once more privately chatting with each other. It is as the rumors said. He's a park maniac. This is too terrifying. You'd better be careful with what you say. Hot damn. I'd better keep this equipment into my dimensional pocket just in case. We should get some risk pay for this interview. That's right. Be sure to apply for it when we get back. The two kept exchanging their thoughts with each other, but both were looking all the more composed than ever, with Damu glancing back at the crowd, which was still marching forward not too far away. Finally, that led them to the main topic of the interview. So, we're going to be discussing the matter with you setting up a workshop here on out. I don't really know too much about the details with setting up the workshop. Gufei actually preferred them asking him about Kung Fu, but it seemed that the two interviewers were just like any normal human beings and were not particularly interested in Kung Fu. Gufei suddenly missed Coward's savior. It had been quite a long while since he had contact with that kid. You're being too courteous, Dama said. Ask away. I'll of course give you an answer if I know anything, Gufei said. The establishment of this workshop is a huge deal in the MMO community. Sword Demon, Royal God Call, Brother Assist, War Without Wounds, Southern Lone Blade, and of course, you yourself, are all renowned individuals within the community. May I ask how all of you came up with the idea of setting up this workshop together? Damu asked. Why they wanted to establish the workshop is of course something young Master Han had analyzed, and it was because, given the current situation, this was the most effective method for them to make a fortune off the people. Gufei naturally knew that he could not reveal all these, and it would be really troublesome to announce this openly, especially to media representative like Damu and Mudu. After pondering for quite some time, Gufei simply answered, we were originally just a mercenary group, just having fun casually. Sometime later, out of boredom, we decided to set up this workshop. Gufei's response to the question was as good as not responding to it, so Damu ruminated on this for a while before pressing on. That efficient monster grinding routine that is being propagated recently. Is that something you created with your Kung Fu? That's right. And it's not just me but Eternal Dominion as well, Gufei said. Eternal Dominion is a martial artist as well? Damu hurriedly asked. Yeah, just like me. Gufei beamed. Oh. So are you two thinking of selling this sort of monster grinding routine to make money? According to what I know, there's been no such business venture in the MMO community, Dama said. That we are mainly doing this because martial practitioners like us have very limited avenues to make a living in the real world these days, and then we accidentally discovered that we can showcase our skills in Vermos. This efficient monster grinding routine is something we inadvertently stumbled on, too, which drew plenty of players' attention and, ultimately, became the seed that started this business, Gufei said. After that, because we didn't have enough manpower, we decided to find our friends to collaborate. Yup. It's ultimately what resulted in us establishing a workshop. Gufei was very satisfied that he managed to elaborate on the question from before, as well as the one he was answering. So that's how it is. In that case, do you mind letting us witness just how much faster is this efficient monster grinding routine? Damu asked. No problem. Gufei waved his hand. Afa, go lure a monster over. Here? The two were surprised. Why not here? This place is really far from the White Mill. The two exclaimed. Hee hee. The efficient monster grinding routine isn't just used for the White Mill grinding map. We intend to develop and spread out to every grinding map. The routine itself will be different from monster to monster, but the efficiency between them will be hardly noticeable. I'll get a monster from here to show you two what I mean, Gufei said. Oh. The two hummed. Meanwhile, Alpha had already gone to pull a monster over. This kid really enjoyed showing off, so the moment he realized that everyone's eyes were on him, he simply went ahead and demonstrated the efficient monster grinding routine in front of everyone. This was the level 35 grinding map that they would abuse daily, so every student was already very familiar with the routine. Alpha's magic staff swung and danced, circling around the monster as he attacked it in melee. It did not take long for the monster to fall, and it was indeed far more efficient than the mage's usual method of flinging spells at range. Yeah, that's about it, Gufei told the two interviewers. He found Alpha's demonstration to be adequate, so he saw no need to do the routine himself. The two were already absolutely astonished by the sight. They hesitated for several seconds before finally asking, "Is that the close combat mage style that you're rumored of being most adept at?" Close combat mage style? Gufei had no idea when this particular phrase had been associated to him, or when it had even appeared. Shaking his head, he answered, "That's not it. That is just the most efficient method for mages to engage monsters. Is it actually more efficient than AO grinding? Have you guys tested it before?" Mewtwo interjected. Gufei could tell that this lady was a mage from how her eyes lit up when Alpha was fighting that monster before, so he merely chuckled. "That will depend on your equipment. If your gear is strong enough, AO grinding as a mage is obviously incomparably more efficient." Strong enough? What do you consider as strong enough, then? Mewtwo asked. "It's strong enough if you can kill monsters 10 level above yours at the moment." Gufei chuckled again. This female reporter was knowledgeable as well, so she got that what Gufei meant was that, even a set of top-grade equipment at the current level of the majority of players would not be enough. She would have to possess over-leveled equipment to have an overwhelming advantage against monster at the same level as her. It was apparent that it was not a grade the average player could even seek to attain. Logically speaking, over-leveled equipment was not something that would appear often, but precisely because of how huge Parallel World was, with no end to strange and wonderful things, and given the vastness of the game, Gufei was not the only one who could chance upon something like Moonlit Nightfalls. Thus, over-leveled equipment would still occasionally appear thanks to coincidences and luck. If the players could use these items themselves, there would be no reason for them to give it up. Even if they were given up, it was not something a normal player could afford. "So when will you all begin your tutoring for the White Mill grinding map?" Mewtwo asked. "We'll start once there's enough people signed up," Gufei answered. "How many is enough?" Mewtwo asked again. "I have no idea about that, others are in charge of that part." These were details that could not be revealed to anybody outside the workshop, so Gufei was not dumb enough to reveal anything about it. "Oh, so can I sign up for it now?" "Of course, you can. Sign me up, please." Mewtwo hurriedly cried out. 99 gold coins, Gufei said. Mewtwo handed over a coin pouch without a moment's hesitation. Reporters doing interviews like them would of course have done their preparation beforehand, so she was very clear about the fee for the lesson. Ahem. Damu coughed. Mewtwo recalled that they were here to do an interview, so she quickly recovered herself, indicating for Mewtwo to continue. "Any other questions?" Gufei also turned to look at Damu. Damu took out a coin pouch and handed it over to Gufei. "I'm registering myself as well." Ahem. Now, it was Mewtwo's turn to cough. Gufei smiled as he kept the pouches and told the two. "Take note of your mailboxes these few days. I'll be sure to send a letter to you two when it's time." "Got it." The pair nodded their heads vigorously. There are still many more questions. If you're not too busy, why don't we head back to the city and find a tavern to sit down for a proper conversation?" Damu and Mewtwo said after a short discussion. "Oh, that works, too." With that, Gufei turned around to instruct his students. "You guys carry on and have fun. Teacher will be going with them now." The students were initially curious about the interview, but after listening for a while and realizing that there was nothing much to it, they had all long since lost interest. The moment they heard that they could play on their own, The whole lot of them bolted off like wild horses, running fast and free into the distance. Gu Fei followed the pair back to the city. Having interacted with Gu Fei for quite a while, Mewtwo and Damu found the man to be very amicable, not even in the least bit scary. Thus, they were emboldened, and the two privately discussed just what questions should they prepare to ask. Over at the wilderness camp, a group of players from Linian City had rushed over and were currently squeezing among this human traffic even as they took in the scene before them. Each of them was dumbfounded, and one of them even showed a grim expression at the sight. Sure enough, this sort of thing still happened. "This is what I've always been most worried about," Yizia said. The men beside him did not say a word. Slivermoon and No Smile were transfixed by the players killing the monsters, secretly memorizing the players' techniques and moves, while Cool Apple had disappeared to God knew where after they had dived into the crowd. Broken Water Arrow, who was observing these players fight the campfire patrollers, commented, he had summarized the monster's attack patterns before developing a simplified, quick, and effective routine to kill this monster.